Champions Queue looking like we got more discussion on that this week. There's so much discussion around it. Lots of varying opinions. JNT and I, we give our opinions on what are the small fixes, and of course, just our general takes on the discussion altogether. And then we get into the Cloud9 discussion because, well, a lot of people are saying they're back. A lot of people aren't so quick to be sold on Cloud9. And then, of course, huge banger series coming up. Well, I guess both series this weekend should be pretty good. 100 Thieves and TL face off, and the winner of that going to finals. So lots to talk about this week. JNT and Blue Jay bringing you episode 81 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Let's get going, JNT. Where are we starting?
Well, we had C9 going up against Golden Guardians on Saturday. I think people were kind of going into this match as like, it's funny, like I think you would say like this was a test for Cloud9, not to say like Cloud9 needed to go out and prove that like they're the much better team, but like Cloud9 needed to go out and look like Cloud9 because they haven't been looking like Cloud9. They've just been kind of, running it down for the last 3 weeks. And we
It
saw,
kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, we saw a new look bot lane out of them. They swapped out Winsome for Isles. And I think a lot of people, I feel like some people kind of met that with confusion, like, okay, things really must be not working out for C9, that they have to make this kind of a drastic change with the player who, let's be honest, didn't even look very good in the lock-in tournament. At least that was my opinion. I did not think that Alice was looking very good at all. And, I mean, neither was Winsome, so I think any change was warranted. So, but I think, they had a pretty good weekend.
I wanted to know what you thought about this. To me, it felt like Cloud9 had more to lose this weekend than to win as far as a community perspective, right? Because if you go 3-0, it's like, well, yeah, you were first place most of the split, and Golden Guardians just snuck into playoffs in the sixth spot. But like, if you don't 3-0, or maybe if it's like a 3-2, let's say, then people are like still kind of monk S on Cloud9 with all their struggles as of late. Would that be a fair assessment or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, it's if you lose to Golden Guardians, it's like, wow, you just fucking lost to Golden Guardians. They're really terrible. Whereas if you beat Golden Guardians, like, okay, that was the expected result. And I think for most people, anything like even a 3-2 would have also been pretty surprising. Because I think the majority of the community was rolling with the 3-1 prediction. I know you did last week. I went with the 3-0, and listening back to my reasoning on why Cloud9 was just going to 3-0 them was because all their players are just better individually. And I think that's just what you saw in this series. Like, I think Golden Guardians as a team was actually playing pretty well. Like, I actually really liked what they did from like a draft standpoint and how they wanted to play the game with these very sort of like all in and divey team comps, which just, it's kind of a snowball at the end of the day. Like, you got to go in, you got to get those early kills. And then as a team, like, you kind of just need to be better to fight your way out of those like 5v4, 4v5 scenarios. And, quite often when we saw Golden Guardians get like a straight up 5v5 team fight, like it was actually going pretty positive for them. Like very often, like they were killing the C9 bot lane and trading 2 for 2 in a team fight and it'll be 3v3, or they were often like getting the first pick or trading jungle for support. And they were really abusing their bot lane this entire series, which I thought was really good. But the main problem, and I think where we saw the biggest skill gap in the series, was whenever we saw like skirmishes around like River, skirmishes around Dragon, these sort of more messy team fights where like the better players are just going to win because they're better players. Those were the fights that Cloud9 was just like absolutely destroying them in. Like if Golden Guardians made a mistake on their engage, it was just an easy wipe. But if they didn't, like they would quite often get like maybe a decent result.
The part that I completely agree with was when you said a lot of the times Golden Guardians were the first ones to find, like they were getting the first pick, if you will, and that was something that I noticed a lot with specifically with the Nocturne. I think the Nocturne pick worked. It felt like they didn't have a good idea with how to follow up on the Nocturne or how to disengage once they got the pick. So that was like a really good thing out of Golden Guardians. Like there was some good for me and some where I was disappointed. That was that was one area where I was like, okay, Golden Guardians definitely knows how to engage fights. And I think that's something that we've seen out of them most of the split with Pride Soccer and with Olay. However, after you've gotten that pick, so many times it feels like they're lost with what to do after that, and Cloud9 would just clean up the rest of the fight. And a lot of times for me, when I was looking at who's screwing up once you've got the advantage in the team fight, a lot of times it was a Blaze Olive just overstepping, thinking that this fight is still happening, where the rest of his team is like, no, this fight is over. We got our 1 or 2 picks. Let's back off for an objective or whatever. Olive is still in there, and they're like, oh, Olive died, and now the trade's even. And it's like every time they could have gotten an advantage, Olive kind of threw it away. And it wasn't always Olive, but most of the time it was. And that's where I was a little bit disappointed with Golden Guardians, was like, God, because I've been talking a lot about a Blaze Olive the past month or so, and I don't think things have really changed. He's really struggled over that last month, and I think it's a big part of why Golden Guardians could pick up any wins in
Yeah.
this series.
I do think though, to sort of flip over to the Cloud9 side of things, we definitely saw a completely different look from them. I think the most obvious thing that people will point to is the top lane picks and priority, which completely sort of flipped on its head to Summit playing this much more like late game scaling style. Like we saw two Gangplank games in game 1 and game 3, which were picks into the Ornn. And then in game 2, we saw Summit actually play the Ornn, and it was kind of really all about team fighting from out of Summit as opposed to kind of a lane dominant style. And but for me, I guess when I go back to what I really wanted to see out of Cloud9 from their perspective going into the series was them fixing up their early game. And I think the early game this game was a lot better just in terms of keeping the early game stable because they were going for this very late game oriented draft. And I think Golden Guardians, like, sure, they were the ones usually getting the initial kills in the early game. They were the ones kind of leading the dance in team fights, but you kind of just saw like the strength of Cloud9's champions. Like once that first engage happens and Golden Guardians like blows their load, like, well, guess what? Cloud9 is they're throwing Victor lasers at you. They're throwing Gangplank barrels on you. Like they have really strong disengage and then re-engage specifically with that GPR. So I think like, I really find it, I think it's really like I don't think in any world Golden Guardians is winning the series. Like I think this was actually like the best possible like performance Golden Guardians could have put up as a team. Obviously, like individually,
Really?
I don't think Blazov played very well, but like I think the way to go is like we need to fight for the early game if Cloud9's going to take this very late game approach, because like dude, if we saw Golden Guardians and C9 try to like go like late game team fighting against each other, like the Golden Guardians has no chance. Where I think they actually had a chance in this series with the way that they played and drafted, but like I said, it was just clear like when it came down to like who had the better hands, like Cloud9 did.
Yeah, I don't agree with this is the best it could have gone for Golden Guardians. Specifically, I mean, I mentioned Olive, so I won't re-mention that again. But I also look at the bot lane, not Olay, but more so Lost. I don't think he really does much of anything.
But
I'm just gonna
I
say
don't think he has been doing anything anyway. So like, why
maybe
expect him to like suddenly be so good? You know what I mean?
maybe that's fair, but also like they still have been able to get advantages pretty much all split long, and they weren't really able to do that this game, or this series rather. So I don't think like this is the best that we've seen out of Golden Guardians, and it would ever get um better, or that it couldn't get better than this. I definitely think it could, but overall, it still is the expected result, right? Like you do still think Cloud9 should come out on top, but I did see a world where Golden Guardians could win this series, and I don't think my opinion on that has changed, despite the fact that I still thought Cloud9 would come out on top. The other thing is that with this series, I think most people where their eyes are looking is the top lane. I mean, so much of the discussion lately has been about Summit, and so you mentioned how he played a couple of GP games in the Ornn game. I think it's a good sign, but you don't really have in 3 games. You don't really have a lot of time to show a bunch of different weapons, right? And why would you if you don't have to? So first of all, it's still valuable that he can whip out the GP and kind of be a beast on that. We saw him absolutely like one-shotting carries towards. I don't remember the end of which game it was. Towards the end of one of the games, he's like one-shotting people.
Game 3, he was like
game 3?
he was like 4 levels ahead of everybody on Golden Guardians.
And I guess what I'm saying here is it's good that he showed he has something else, because a lot of the discussion was, well, his champion pool is really small and can he perform on other things? And I think if you're a Cloud9 fan looking at this weekend, it's like, okay, look, he showed he has other things and he didn't have to show anything more, which is like, that's a good kind of happy medium, if you will, for looking at this series specifically.
Yeah, and like with that same conversation, like Golden Guardians, like they really couldn't do anything. Like it wasn't like they were letting Summit, like they weren't letting him free. Like they were still like everyone does against Summit. They were banning the Jace, they were banning the Gnar, and they were banning Zeri because they're red side. So like Golden Guardians is literally just stun locked into these same 3 red side bans, and it basically just allowed Cloud9 to play whatever they want. And like that's part of the big advantage that comes with Summit is because everyone knows he's such a beast on the Jace and on the Gnar, you basically have to throw 2 bans at it, or you run the risk of just getting shut on lane. And at the same time, you could like leave one of those up and then hella play for top side. But if I'm Cloud9 on those side of things, like when you get Summit on a Gnar and you get him on a Jace, like that should also be your primary point of focus. And I think Cloud9, with Summit's improved performance, it's just an even bigger tool for them going forward against these other top teams. Because even against 100 Thieves, we did see anytime that they were on red side, they were throwing the Jason and R bands as well. So, should Cloud9 kind of go up in a rematch against 100 Thieves, like the top lane is not going to look the same at all because, it definitely looks like Cloud9 is kind of like thrown that strategy completely out the window, yet other teams are still forced to ban the Jason and the Gnar unless, we kind of see draft adaptations in best of fives. Like, if things aren't working out, like you got to switch up some of your bans, then you run the risk of leaving one of those picks open. So it's still problematic for other teams given Summit's better performance in this series and
Yeah.
still the threat of those two bans.
Yeah, and I don't want to paint the picture like this was a perfect series out of Summit because Golden Guardian still did get a lot of successful ganks off in the top lane. Mind you, it's not exactly a lot of counterplay when it's like Ornn ulti and Nocturne ulti under the GPs. Like he's gonna die there. But the point is, they still showed that they can still gank top lane and that there is a place for other teams to get advantages versus Cloud9. However, Summit just didn't hard run it down after those deaths like he had been in the last couple of weeks or whatever. So
But
there's still
even
some.
in to your point exactly, even in that game one where you did see Golden Guardians throw hella pressure topside, where you saw them go Ornn R, Nocturne R, Cloud9 really quickly adapted to having Blabber shadow him under his tower because
I was gonna say that. Were you talking about the play bot lane or no?
yeah, when basically
That's where I was going next.
Summit's
Yeah.
pushing away bot lane, and Blabber's just reading the fact that like, oh hey, they're probably gonna double ult Summit again on this wave, and they counter the play. It ends up being like a 3-for-1 for C9. I think they grabbed like third Drake off of that as well, and like the game was kind of like over from there because it had been kind of even in the early game, but like C9 had the massive scaling, and they had now just taken I think their third drag of the game. But yeah, like you could kind of see like Cloud9 was making those early game adjustments because even in that game one, when top lane things were going wrong, like well now like they'll just have Blabber shadow him when he's pushing those waves out, and I think Blabber also had like a pretty good series. Everyone's gonna like meme that first play of the game where like Fudge backwards, Fudge backwards lasered and then Blabber kick flash, but didn't like kick him the right way and then like ran it down. But I think Blabber had a pretty good series overall.
No, I think you basically took the point that I was going to say is that like even though yes, like Summit was being targeted, Cloud9 was able to adapt. Is basically the point that you're making there, and that's where I give credit to Blabber there, but not just Blabber because the bot lane, who they were mid, they cleared a wave mid, just started rotating towards bot. It felt like it almost felt like you could tell comms were guys, they're gonna gank Summit right now. Let's hover him because as soon as they did, Blabber was there, but also the bot lane even got there in time to help out and clean up. And then, yeah, the game was over there. So definitely Cloud9 starting to understand what teams want to do to them, which is also a plus in the Cloud9 column. You mentioned that one play where Blabber, he kind of messes up, but also the Victor laser that goes kind of into left field. I hope people don't focus too much on that because later on, I mean, we did see later on there was the quadra kill for Victor for Fudge in that one team fight, and that's just another one where he doesn't miss a laser and he knows the exact time that I'm safe now. It's safe for me to flash in and do full combo, and he did that and he cleaned up the fight and he got rewarded with a quadra kill. Like that wasn't just I'm last hitting. That was he landed every single one of his abilities in the fight. So yeah, maybe he didn't land like the Victor W, but that's usually like a zoning ability.
Dude,
Like
Victor is looking super broken right now. Like every time I see that champion in the game, it's just like if you have like late game scaling with the Victor and like double tanks, like it just feels like you're gonna win. Like that champion is just so gross. Like it just does way too much damage.
Not if a Blaze Olive is playing it.
Oh
but
yeah, you put an enter on any champion, you lose.
I get your point. I just want to touch real quick because Raggio in our Discord asked us to talk about Game 3 draft, and I'm glad that he brought it up because he basically said that he liked the draft, but he wanted our take on it. And honestly, I agree. I liked the draft a lot as well. But what were your thoughts on it?
Well, one thing I'll say this before I get into it.
Should we say what the draft was? Should we?
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like it was a variation on pretty much their game 2 draft where they went like heavy dive with Gwen, Nocturne, and Leona. And instead, the pairing it with the Nocturne because like you want good dive with Nocturne because like it was clear it was clear that was Golden Guardian's game plan was to dive the backline, blow it up, and then from there you should in theory win those 4v3 +1 advantage team fights. And I think they did a really good job kind of adjusting that in game 3. They took the Ornn away because again it's a really good team fighting tool, and then they threw the Senna TK in there. And one thing that I didn't even realize, but I found out when I was watching Doublelift's YouTube video, is kind of like the condensed version of like watching the series.
Yeah.
Apparently, I didn't even know this, but Senna TK has actually been disabled for like quite a long time due to a bug. And I never knew that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of surprising. And it sounds like at least he himself is of the opinion that this is still like a really strong bot lane duo, and that it just hasn't been played because it's been disabled due to a bug. So I totally forgot like that people that combo existed. I just didn't think that it was like that relevant, and that's why people were playing it. But maybe we'll be seeing a lot more Senna TK in the future, because that is also like another kind of late game scaling like god team fight comp. Like that was like the
Yeah.
TL, that was a TL special last year, was playing Senna TK.
Yeah, I like the Senna TK, and the other thing that I like about this draft as well is that Olive is on Ari. Look, I just don't trust him to position himself if he's playing like an Orianna or a Victor. I think that having the Ari is a much safer pick because of the mobility that you get with your ultimate, and it pairs really well with a Nocturne. It's really easy to follow up on a Nocturne ulti with an Ari ulti, so that was something that I liked about the draft as well. Yeah, sure, they still didn't win or whatever, but I thought their draft was a lot better, and yeah, so I guess I just thought I would mention that. Um, Last thing I want to ask you, J and T, because we kind of have it in our title. How comfortable are you with C9 being back on track? Yes, no, almost, kind of, sorta.
I think I would say, yeah, I would say a little bit yes. But it's not because they 3-0'd Golden Guardians and Summit was like on these different champion picks, because kind of like I mentioned last week, the main thing that I was hoping that C9 would improve on would be their early game, and actually having a plan in the early game other than we're going to pick these champions to smash lane and then we're going to hopefully win the game, because they, like I said before, they've been just playing this like super greedy style of playing these very feast or famine champions, and also putting Blabber on a very passive champion like Viego. Like he played like before this weekend, he played a bunch of games on Viego, which is just like a super anti-Blabber champion, I think so. But he got the Lee Sin all 3 games. Lee Sin's also looking really broken right now, but I don't know, maybe like Closer and Blabber are just too cracked at the champion. But I liked their draft adjustments. I liked how they kind of reprioritized, what they want to do in the early game. And to me, the 3-0 was expected, so that didn't surprise me at all. It was just more about how the 3-0 happened, and for the most part, it was fairly clean. There were a couple hiccups, kind of just in the early game, like not really in terms of like what I was too worried about, but like just sometimes you just lost those early skirmishes, and that happens. But Cloud9 was clearly playing for late game anyway, so like that's where I feel like the story was gonna be made right there.
For me, I'm not sold. And it's not really necessarily their fault, but a lot of the advantages that they got, I do think was kind of given to them. I'll remind people that in game one, Olive just uses his Corki W like it's an actual Corki package and just straight up ints. Whereas I think Golden Guardians should win that fight, or at the very least, even if they don't win that fight, they should push Cloud9 off the drag and get the objective. That's more what I thought would happen. And then Olive just kind of ints and dies. And it's like, okay, now you gave over a kill and Cloud9 could get the objective. And then what else? Then there's like when they're playing the Senna TK comp with Ornn, like they're fighting while Ornn is level 11 and like Senna doesn't really have any items or anything like that. And I know she's fasting Senna, but like you scale really, really well. And yes, so does Cloud9, but I believe the scaling is in your favor there. So like, why are you hard forcing on second Herald fight, for example? Like that's something that they did twice in this series when it's like, I don't know, like, would other teams do that? I don't think so. None of the other teams that are left, I should say, in playoffs would do that. And so that's where I'm a little bit hesitant to say that they're back, but definitely play like you have to admit that they're playing better. And so I definitely admit that they're playing better than what we've seen. I'm just not as convinced just yet. I need to see a little bit more, and maybe we'll see that against EG, I guess would be my answer. But for now, I say no, not yet.
Yeah, I say a little bit, but like
What about
I'm not sold.
what are your thoughts on the whole support swap?
Yeah, I
Forgot about
mean,
that almost.
I guess when C9 posted the original video of Max Waldo kind of talking about the swap, the main thing that he was sort of talking about was sort of in-game communication with regards to the early game and sort of generating a plan. And I guess from an outside perspective, like to me, that's what it felt like was the problem with Cloud9, was that they had no plan in the early game. And to hear them just outright say that in the video kind of felt like, everything that I was watching actually like was true. And they sort of had, to me, like, okay, like they know what their problem is, and like this is what they're trying to do to fix it. So I think if they made this move and it failed horribly, then it was like, okay, this shit is really doomed. But it when you have a native English speaker, like it's obviously just going to be a lot earlier. It's going to be a lot easier to communicate in the early game when the communication really needs to be on point.
Honestly, so do you watch the comms videos that are released, like the what I'm
Not
talking
not
about,
not
right?
every week.
I like to watch those, and I actually remember even towards the start of the season, I remember being really impressed with how Blabber and Fudge, like they've learned to like communicate in like Like
Broken
me
English,
top.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I know that seems so simple to do, but I feel like that's actually really difficult to do when you're not used to communicating that way, and when you're actually trying to think about what your next play is rather than trying to talk in broken English. And of course, it's just as difficult for the guys that don't know English. But it's a really interesting dynamic to see how you have to communicate. And some people say it's even better, right? Because a lot of people will say that comms are usually flooded when everyone speaks English and stuff like that. So it could be an advantage, but to me, it's like it's so it's just interesting. I guess it's just interesting to see how teams go about communicating when there's obvious language barriers.
Yeah, but I mean,
Um,
at this point, I would expect Isles to probably just play the rest of the way.
it is
Despite,
weird that they do it in the middle of playoffs, eh?
yeah, but I mean, like I said,
Gotta do what you
like
gotta do.
to me, from an outsider perspective, who I mean, like I'm not gonna say like I'm all knowing, but like like what I was watching was like Cloud9 have no fucking idea what they're doing in the early game, and then they post this video about like, hey, like we need a person who can play support who communicates better in the early game, and I was like, okay, 2 + 2 = 4, like there we go, like let's just roll with it.
Yeah. Anyways, definitely Cloud9 looking better. Should be a banger series about EG, and we will get into that series a little bit later. For now, let's talk about EG Fly, the
No, no,
game or
no,
this.
no, no, no.
No, 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 no,
Remember,
no. What?
we.
You tell me what's going on. I don't know what's going on.
Well, I thought, weren't we going to talk about Golden Guardians? Give them our little rating.
I asked you this earlier, and you said after we were done talking about the series. I thought you meant after talking about both series.
Ah, so
See a little
which?
miscommunique there. But yeah, sure, whatever you want to do.
Well, let's talk about Golden Guardians really quickly, just so we don't have to
Okay.
bring them up again.
Yeah,
Um,
no problem.
but I mean, for me, I think I had a bit of I had a higher opinion of Golden Guardians than I think the majority of the community. So for them to make playoffs, I think that was a win for them because I think they were about at that 6th to 7th place. Although it did feel like the end of their end of the season was a lot worse than kind of what we saw in the middle. Felt like in the middle when they beat those teams like Team Liquid and they like I think they were like 5-4 at one point, and then they kind of finished the season out like not really too well. I think they were 8-10. Or no, they were
Do
in three.
people know what we're talking about right now? We're the post-mortem, the score. Should we explain that?
Oh yeah, I mean we just give all the eliminated teams a little 1-10 score.
Yeah,
But
after a team is eliminated, we like to do the question is how happy is this team with the result based off how what they would have been or what their expectations were for themselves going into the split. So like in this case, it's how happy from a scale of 1 to 10 is Golden Guardians with the result of their split from where they started before the split even started.
yeah, I cocked that one up, but
That's okay.
I would give them a 7.
Okay, and that is for sorry, go again as to
Oh,
why you think it's a 7.
I just think they played to exactly where they were supposed to be, and maybe even push a little bit higher from the majority of the community. And I think they unfortunately ran into a pretty good team in playoffs. I mean, I think if they went up against a FlyQuest or even an EG, I think they probably would have had a much better chance in the series. I just thought that like the matchup against Cloud9 is just a bad matchup for them because
Yeah.
like pound for pound, they're outclassed in every role, but they had like their team play is their strength, and Cloud9's weakness at the time had been their sort of team coordination and team play. But to me, it was just a bad matchup for them. Like anything beside a 3-0 would have been pretty surprising for me.
Yeah, I think any team that just barely squeezes into playoffs, none of them want to. None of them will say, "Yeah, we want to face Cloud9." So I do agree with you. Like it sucked that is their matchup. However, for me, I only give them a 5. So there's a couple of good things, right? They made playoffs, sure. They squeezed in at the 6th spot, which isn't like amazing, but they did make playoffs. Um, One of the things why I don't think they're so happy is they kind of struggled with the same thing almost the whole split. Early game was good, and almost the
That's true.
whole split, they didn't fix that problem of being able to close out games. So I don't think they're too happy with that. And the other thing is, I don't know if their fixes are that obvious as far as a position is concerned. Like, I still don't really have a lot of faith in Licorice. I still don't really have a lot of faith in Olive or Lost. And that's 3 of your 5 pieces that, me personally, if I'm Golden Guardians, I'm going, shit, I don't know if, like, these guys are going to be enough for us to make worlds. Because I think that's what these teams want to do, right? These lower budgeted teams, they're not trying to win the LCS. They just want to somehow find a way to squeeze in to worlds. And I don't really see how that happens. And if you remember when we talked about Dignitas when they got eliminated, you and I looked at each other and said, look, they didn't make playoffs, but it's pretty obvious that you look at the top lane and that's the problem. Like that's where you need to focus on if you want to have a shot of trying to go to worlds. You try to replace Fake God, and that's one area. And so that's where I'm a little bit colder on Golden Guardians. Like, yes, they made playoffs, which is better than Dig, but I think they got a few more fires to put out.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe this is like a bit of an incorrect way of looking at it, but and like maybe this is unrealistic, but we saw Licorice play a lot better towards the end of summer, and we saw a Blaze Olive actually have a really good, in my opinion, a really good summer split.
Yes.
At the end of season 11, and I was pretty surprised honestly to see how terrible he played this split, and lost I guess is a little bit more understandable. Although I do think that even coming into the season, he was like a little bit like overlooked. Not to say that he's like some god or whatever, but like I just don't think he's as bad as everyone made him out to be. So maybe
That's
it's a
what
bit,
I thought as well.
but just maybe it's a bit copium to say like, well, I think if these players just play a little bit better individually, like they're actually going to be a pretty good team, because I think their team play is actually like their biggest strength, which is usually the problem that a lot of teams and bottom teams struggle with, is that like they can have some good individual pieces and they can have some good players who can get advantages in lane, but more often than not, their team play is going to be terrible and their early game is usually terrible. But I think for the case of Golden Guardians, like I'm actually a pretty big believer in their early game and their ability to sort of like plan out the first 10 minutes and draft well. But they, as you said, like they did have a consistent problem that they didn't really manage to fix. So you're kind of convincing me on that one. Maybe I'd drop them down to a 6, but I still think it's pretty positive overall for them.
And the last thing that I'll say, which is some good, is like I think you didn't really know how Pride Stalker would work out, and he looked pretty good for the most part. And same thing with Olay, who was was he retired? I don't know what to call it, but he hadn't been playing for some time, and well, he grinded his way back, made it back, and I thought he looked pretty good. Was he the best support in the league? No, but he was solid. So there are some good things to hold on to. Yeah, I guess I just gave him a 5. They're not too happy, they're not too upset, I guess. So I gave him the 5.
It's decent, yeah.
Okay, now can we go to EG Fly?
Yes, EG Fly Quest.
As long as I have your permission.
You have received the thumbs up to go forward.
Okay, EG Fly. So both of us came into this series pretty much expecting EG to win. Did we both go? Was it 3-0 or did you go 3-1?
I said 3-1. I don't remember what you said.
So you had the perfect predictions this weekend, J&T.
I'm a beast.
Flex it a little bit.
I'm a beast.
Well, I guess you flexed on the last one. Okay, anyways.
I'm a beast.
Yeah, so you know what? I'll start with the area that I was most surprised, and I feel like people might think this is a hot take, but if you do, I would say go rewatch this series. I thought Kumo looked better than Impact, and I didn't expect to say that. Kumo has not been very good most of this. I mean, he has had some good moments. I don't want to make it sound like he's been fake god levels, but Kumo has been mostly not too good. And I actually thought that this series, he looked pretty good. Most of the lanes weren't really swinging heavily in one way or the other that it shouldn't have. Like usually the Ornn was a little bit behind the Gwen and whatever, but he actually had some really nice team fights on Gwen. And even the one game where he's playing the Gwen and Ornn, they're like kind of even in CS. So I think people would be like, oh, Kumo should have his CS lead. But Inspired was going top quite a lot in that particular game. That I was like, okay, Kumo, not bad. Now I don't want to completely ignore there was like the where they throw right before Elder, like Kumo gets caught.
Oh God,
and
that was
is at
disgusting.
a really bad time. Like there was absolutely mistakes out of Kumo in this series, but Impact did not look too good either. And I actually thought that Kumo looked better than him this series. I can't believe I'm saying it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I actually agree with that, but I guess I wouldn't. I mean, it's one thing to say that he was better than him. It's another thing to say that he was way better than him, because I don't think he was way better. I mean, I don't know. I don't think. I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, but like, I think it is objectively correct that Kumo did play better than Impact, although I don't think either top was like particularly insane. To me, when I look at this series, after kind of watching it back, like, not like I didn't watch like every minute of every game. Once again, I kind of watched like the condensed version of like Double F's video, which is like 45 minutes or whatever. But this series actually felt close, or this series wasn't as close as it looked. Am I saying that right?
Games 1 and 2, I thought games 1 and 2 were close, and then 3 and 4 just weren't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I thought that game 1 was like super close. Like, it was close, but like, FlyQuest at no point was like actually ahead or even at like any point in the game post like 5 minutes. Like they were behind the whole game. I think. I don't know. I don't know exactly if I'm like saying that correctly, but like I feel like game 2 kind of skewed the perception of the series. of it being a close series because game 2 was such a close game, and like FlyQuest
It
was
was a
actually.
banger too.
Oh, it was a banger game. Like FlyQuest was like easily in control of the game. They have this massive throw where Kumo is like pushing out a side lane with 15 seconds to go before Elder spawns. He wastes his W. He gets ran down. Then Jose Diodo just turns into a crackhead and just engages 1v4. He dies. They lose Elder. The game stalls out for like 15 minutes because like EG takes Elder, then Baron, then Elder again. And then the next Elder, like the third Elder fight that comes around, well, like I kind of just skipped over like the 1 HP Nexus. Like that was after second Elder. Like they won the second Elder team fight. They ran into the Nexus and it was like literally one hit. Like they die. Next Elder's fight happens. Kumo almost runs it down. Then he escapes and TPs into the base with 1 HP and they win that game. But like, dude, other than game 2, like FlyQuest, they couldn't do a single thing. Like they did so much wrong in the series. Like it was crazy. Like Takui had a fucking belter, and by belter I mean a fucking shitter. Like that guy fucking had a garbage series. Like
belter,
I don't know,
where does that come from? What is that? Is that from something?
I don't know, dude. That. Like like it was just a fucking like madness. Like I don't even know. Like
Takui's got JNT at a loss for words. That's
dude,
how bad.
Like,
but this is what we've been seeing out of Takui for a few weeks now. Like I was not surprised by this,
dude. And I guess
it's been bad. And I know people don't like to say it because everyone loves Takui, and honestly, so do I. I'm a huge Takui fan. But if he's playing bad, you guys say he's playing bad. So, and that's what we've seen for the last month. So I was not surprised by it.
Yeah, like I know, like you can't really like this. You can't like act. Okay, what am I trying to say? Like, dude, this guy.
Kills,
no, but
man.
like he was like. I remember when we looked at the All Pro teams, like. And I think you had Takui third team, and I didn't have him on the list because I had him in favor of blue, and we both had Fudge number 2. And I guess when I saw Takui at number 2, like I wasn't necessarily.
I had him 3, did I?
Yeah, you did.
Oh,
but
I'm going to double check. Sorry to cut you off.
I like, dude. I just like it. That point just went into my mind. Like this guy was like second team All Pro mid. Like what the fuck is going on? Because this guy is like literally like playing like a fucking like playing like worst LCS mid in these games. Like it was really bad.
So yeah, I did have him third, but I do remember when we talked about this, we both said pretty much that like the mid lane pool was.
Oh yeah, I mean, but he also had a he also had a really strong start to the split when like FlyQuest was on like their in their first 8 games, he was probably like by far the best player on their team, and that was when he was whipping out the Veigar and like kind of smurfing. But watching this version of Takui was like holy fuck, like this guy is like He's vying for worst LCS mid with these performances.
Yeah, no, he was free kills mid, and what I was about to say was like if he played the second half of the split the way he did the first, he might just be first all pro, but he didn't, and it was like I don't know what happened. It's kind of similar to the impact thing or to the summit thing where like people just started ganking him and he started dying, which is like. I mean, what can you say about that? You can't just be chain dying. The one thing that I will say, and it's kind of similar to Olive, is I like Takui a lot more on the Ahri. I guess I'm just a big fan of the Ahri pick because you have so much mobility that it is really difficult to punish Ahri. She's got great wave clear, right? You just queue through the freaking wave and you roam. And so it's a lot more difficult to get picked off when you have three charges of your ulti. And so maybe that's why I thought he looked good on that pick and nothing else, is just because it's hard to punish that pick. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anybody like the best player on FlyQuest in the series was Kumo, and like that is bad if that is the case here. Because like I think Jose Diodo, like in my opinion, like he had a pretty terrible series except for the first game. The first game he was smurfing. The second game he was running it down. Even though like they won that game, like I think he was playing like really terrible that game on the J4. And
it was funny.
In game 3, I lost. Dude, that bot dive was probably the worst bot dive I've ever seen in my life. Man, like they're not waiting for the wave. Like Afremu was flash hooking a minion. They're going on the Tom Kench who has like gray health plus shield. They didn't time the Jinx flash because I think Doublelift, they said it on the coach stream, but like Doublelift was saying like they probably thought that Jinx didn't have flash, and then like Jose Diodo goes for engage, Jinx just flashes away, and it's like, oh fuck, like we gotta kill Tom Kench now, and like, well, congrats, you're trying to kill Tom Kench on the tower, like that's not gonna happen, and like, dude, like, and then dude Johnson was just like he went fucking like retard mode in that game, bro. Like game 4 where he just like runs it down into the Baron pit. Oh my god, dude, it was like so garbage. Like,
okay, the Jose Diodo thing. What was really weird was I remember thinking during the TriCast, because that's where I watched it first with the TriCast. They start praising Jose, and then he starts running it down. And then when I was rewatching the games today, I think it was it Kobe? God, I don't even remember who the hell was casting. It was one of the casters started praising Jose Dioto as well. And then as soon as he did that, that's when the dive happened, the dive bot lane. And I'm like, man, he just got caster cursed by both of the co-streams and the actual regular stream. It was like he had such a good start to the series and then really just started running it down. I
Dude,
don't know if like tilt was in play here or what was going on, but you're right in saying that like his game one was great and things were looking good, and then all of a sudden he kind of went psycho mode. And more so specifically once they started to throw a little bit in game two is when he really started to go psycho mode. It's almost like he felt, I need to make something happen because my team's throwing this game, and maybe that's the case, maybe it's not, but we saw night and day Jose Dioto out of this series.
dude, like watching Tank Jarvan makes me want to blow my brains out. Like that shit is so garbage. Please, people like around the world need to stop doing it. Like when I was watching like LEC do it with like Yankos and Malrang were doing it. Like, oh my god, it's like so fucking useless. Does 0 damage. At least, at the very least, people are realizing they need to build Zanya second on J4 because like
I
I
thought
feel like
Malrang had success with it, no?
I mean,
thought
yeah, but
remember him having-
I still think that Tank J4 is garbage, and you should just play AD Jarvan. It's a bit ironic though that like Jose Dota's good game was on Tank Jarvan, and his garbage game was on like regular Jarvan, even though like he was just playing like shit in general. But I don't know, Tank Jarvan, in my opinion, is just so garbage. But at the very least, people have realized now building second item Zanyas on J4 is broken. I've been preaching that shit for like a year and a half now. Like, take the stopwatch rune on Jarvan. It's fucking broken. At least people are doing that now. This whole first strike thing though is whack as fuck. Like I don't understand why that's happening. Oh my god.
It's funny that that you say like Tank Jarvan isn't the play anymore because you used to play a lot of it. Now I realize this is different metas. I totally recognize not the same time. But do you remember I used to tell you all the time, I'd be telling JNT guys, I'd be like, man, stop going Tank Jarvan and just
But that was when
over
Tank
these
Jarvan was
fucking
good.
teams. No, I know. But the thing is, damage Jarvan was not bad at that time either. Like I said, different times. But I just find it funny that like now you've become, and I realize that things change, but now you've become this guy that's like, dude, let's just go damage Jarvan. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's because dude, item
yeah,
rework.
man.
Item rework. Core Drinker is just
Yeah.
too fucking busted. Like, don't, dude.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna go tank, do not go Chem Tank. Please go Frozen or go Sunfire. Oh my god, it's just disgusting.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about EG in this series because the one I'm going to echo what I was saying last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Doesn't matter. I mentioned how Inspired was playing a lot better with his mid and support. They are invading like crazy. Like Jose Dioto could not walk into his jungle without finding Vulcan sitting there or JoJo. Like it was insane how many times. And this might have been in game one. It might have been more than game one, but there was one game specifically where they were just living in his jungle, and I was like, this is what like one of the reasons I think why EG is starting to look so much better. Not only are they, first of all, FlyQuest highly or heavily relies on Jose Dioto. I think he's been their best player for most of the split. And so you take him out of the equation, that's a really good start for beating them. But also, what it's pulling away the FlyQuest bot lane a lot of the times when they're invading the bottom lane side of the map, because the bot lane is trying to like collapse on them, and then next thing you know, EG just has Danny just wailing on plates as FlyQuest goes to rotate over, and Danny's getting such an advantage. And let me say, Danny knows what to do with the gold, man. I will keep reiterating that as well. He always deals so much damage in team fights. He's actually being a really good AD carry right now. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I just got to praise Danny. That guy's a beast.
Dude, random aside, but still kind of relevant. Like in Doublelift's video where he was talking about champion skew, we'll get into that later. He said that Danny wasn't playing well this split, and I was like,
Yeah, not
dude.
true, man.
And he also said that like Fudge wasn't playing well, and I was like I don't know, missed me with that. But I mean, to go into the EG side of things, like for me, it's a bit difficult to take things away from this series because of how bad FlyQuest was playing. And like, dude, like if you're listening to this right now and you were like, "Man, FlyQuest wasn't that bad. Like it was a close series." Like, dude, go back and watch some of these games and watch what FlyQuest is just doing individually. They literally, the only reason why game one was close at all was because of how hard Jose Dioto was smurfing with Jarvan. Like, unfortunately, he fell off. He fell off.
That game too.
Yeah,
Afro had a pretty good game on the. I think it was Leona in that one.
He was playing
right?
Yumi. He was playing Yumi.
That was a different one then. There was a Leona game where Afro was pretty pog too.
That was CM2.
Okay, there you go. That one then.
But yeah, I don't know. Like it's. I do think that EG overall had a decent series. I think it was kind of just one of those things where like they just did what they needed to do. It was also clear in the series that EG was going for these kind of late game oriented drafts. They put Danny on like the hyperscalers with Zeri, with Jinx 2 games. I played the Jinx Tom Kench in games 3 and game 4, and you saw when FlyQuest's early game plays failed in game 3 and 4 against Jinx Tom Kench, it was just GG. And I mean, I think what was it? It was game 4 that FlyQuest decided to flip it up a little bit and go with Renata in the bot lane. And the game was just kind of over from the level 1, where they took like this really whack 2v2, where it was like people were doing like their respective 1v1s, where the support was hitting the ADC and then the enemy support was hitting the enemy, like the other ADC. And, you know, they kind of just lost the game off level 1. Dude, like, this makes the EG C9 matchup just more confusing for me, because I don't think I learned anything from this series from the EG perspective.
See, I'm kind of like that with the last series that we talked about, where like I guess
No, I agree.
sold on C9.
I agree.
I think that's kind of a good thing, because I think that makes the series, like, I think both of the series that we're getting this weekend are really, really difficult to predict, which is like,
I agree.
that is good. That is a very good thing. So, anyways, yeah, I'm really happy with that. Not too much more for me on the series, honestly. I don't have much else to say.
Yeah,
I think you're
the
kind of
only
right in that FlyQuest didn't really look too great, and EG just kind of outplayed them.
Yeah,
Not a big
the only
surprise
thing
there.
I have to say is I implore you to go back and look at these series if you think that FlyQuest was actually playing well or if the series was close. Like, just take a second look, because my god, it was some dog shit.
I would say games 3 and 4 were pretty disappointing from me specifically. I would say that's where, but I mean, who wants to go back and watch games when they were bad? I don't think a lot of people want to do that.
Also, I guess
But
last thing I'll
knock
say,
yourself out, right?
not necessarily exclusive to this series, but we're kind of seeing Gwen kind of randomly come back into the meta, and I think it's kind of just seems to be the go-to response into Ornn, which to me is pretty good, because Ornn's not a champion that really wins or loses lane, and it feels like that's exactly what a champion like Gwen wants to do, is just farm the lane out and scale up and just be a beast in team fights, because Kumo was actually doing pretty well on the Gwen for the most part in team fights in game 2. And even in what was the other game that Impact was playing
Scion game?
Gwen? No, it was the other in game 4 that when Impact was playing the Gwen into the Ornn. He was also doing a lot of work in those team fights. I mean, that was kind of like a snowbally game, so it's hard to, you know, really take a lot of lessons away from that. But Gwen sort of seems like the go-to pick into Ornn, and then Gangplank is also seeming pretty good if you don't need the AP topside. But yeah, I just think that like people are sort of starting to figure out the meta in terms of, well, if this is just going to turn back into like blind pick Ornn, blind pick Scion, blind pick Malphite, like there's actually answers, and these answers seem to be pretty good.
Yeah. And Kumo shit on him with Scion, and like, mind you, he got some
Dude, it was solo bolo, dude. Straight up solo bolo, level 6. Like,
yeah, I think I don't know if we saw it on camera. I'm assuming he just ate the orange, and Kumo was like, "You can't do that." And then once GP had no orange, he just ulted him.
One other thing I gotta mention in that game.
Must have been what happened.
One other thing I gotta mention in that game with regards to that. It's kind of, I gotta flame Kumo here, because his spellbook this game was so fucking trash, because on 2 separate occasions during that game, he had a summoner spell which he couldn't change back to get a TP when he needed to base TP in situations, so he had to stay in the fight with like at 50% or below 50% HP in these late game team fights, because he's fucking up his like summoner spell usage, and he's picking summoner spells that he can't cycle through unless he has an opponent in front of his face, and he's just like fighting at 40% HP in massive team fights. Sorry, Kumo, you had to get the flame as well, but like, dude, FlyQuest played like dog shit.
But it's okay, because he backdoored the Nexus, and that game was Pog. That game was hella hype.
It was.
So
It
all
was
is forgiven.
It was that's also another game where like the fans were back, and so like,
okay, that was like the best moment so far of having the fans back, because the fans were going ape shit, right? And like, anyways, that was so exciting. I loved that game. Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about FlyQuest in their post-mortem then. What's your rating? Do you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
I mean, I'll go first, but it's kind of obvious. Okay. Like, I think I'm gonna have to give him like 3.
Ooh, okay.
Mainly because, I mean, I think this was another team that didn't necessarily have the highest of expectations going into the split.
Okay.
However, the way that they started the split versus the way that ended, like the way that it ended, was just like pretty jaw-dropping in terms of how hard this team fell off. And similar to what you were talking about with Golden Guardians in terms of like identifying problems, like this team kind of had like
there's still a lot of them.
Problems started to form, and as the season went on, there was just way more questions than answers. It's just like, well, Kumo's still not very good. Oh, what the fuck's going on? Tukui's like all of a sudden like looking really, really bad. their bot lane is like and then like as the season kind of progressed, like Afro wasn't playing as well, and Johnson was kind of
Yeah.
going back to being useless and not do anything. Johnson and
Yeah.
sorry once again, Jose Dioto, but like you look like dog shit at games 2, 3, and 4 in this series. Although I'm a big Jose Dioto fan, and I think he's actually really good. He was the best player. He was their best player of the season. It's not. He's left a bad taste in my mouth.
So Lamau LP asks a good question. He says, "Is it the team that fell off, or everyone else got better over time plus
I
figured
do.
them out?"
They fell off plus L plus ratio.
It's probably a mix of both, but mostly the fallout. When I'm thinking about players falling off, Afro suddenly couldn't really find ways to make plays. That was only for like a 3-4 week span, so it wasn't like the whole split. But also then Tukui was just free picks, like I said, that was for like a month as
He
well.
was going Phoenix
Um,
mode, dude.
so like definitely they did get worse. But maybe I'll try to sway you again, JT. I don't know if I can or not, but I'll try to. I actually gave them a 6, and I may have cheated a little bit here, but hear me out. This team is better in every single role than they were in summer last year. And that's why I say I'm cheating a little bit, because it's not necessarily the start of the split, but think about where this team was at the end of last year.
Kumo
Right?
might just be as bad, if not worse.
No, see, I think Kumo's much better than he was before. I think this is probably Kumo's best split, which doesn't really say much for Kumo, but I still think it was his best split. I know that sounds really troll to say, but I mean, Kumo has not been a good player in this league. Let's just be honest about it. He was very inconsistent this split with some high highs, mostly low lows, but some high highs, which I think that makes it his best split. And he played well in a playoff series in a team that is better than them.
Who was their ADC last year?
Wasn't it Johnson?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Maybe I can get behind this.
Johnson. Yeah, so Johnson
it was
definitely
Afro who wasn't there. I was thinking that it was Johnson who
It was
wasn't there.
Diamond, and then they
Dreams.
put in yeah. So think about it that way, right? You had Pala Fox or
I-
Pala B, as people were calling him back then.
I can.
You had Pala B, Beakerish. What were the other stupid names? Buzzson.
Oh god.
People don't know what the
I mean,
fuck I'm talking about. It was a
I,
really
I can get behind this argument. I just think that the way that it started versus the way that it ended is just like really bad.
And that's something you have to consider, right? I mean, we've said it a million times, but they started 5-1 and they ended 10-10. Like that's not good. That sucks. But you're still, you know what? They were in like trash last year. It didn't really matter who they were playing. They were a bad team. They had to put in all of their academy players, and then they looked good for like 1 week, and then they were still trash. And the next split, you bounce back with what is still a budget roster, and you found a new fan favorite in Takui, and you went 10-10. You made playoffs.
You almost convinced me to bump them up to a 4, but then I remembered, you are cheating a little bit because we're comparing them to expectations relative to the start of the split, not compared to their last team. So you almost got me, but I'll stick with my 3.
I admitted that I'm cheating, but I gave them a 6, so
it's okay.
Yeah. Anyways, I still don't see how they're gonna make Worlds, and that's a problem as well. So maybe I should bump them down to a 5. I don't know, but that's our post-mortem for FlyQuest. See ya in a month.
More than a month?
No, 2 months.
Dude, like
early June, right? 2 months.
I think it's mid to late June, isn't it, when it starts?
I don't know. It's April 4th or April 12th, rather.
I don't know.
We're mid-April. I'm gonna say 2 months. I don't know. We'll see them when we see them. Okay, before we move on and we're going to talk about 100 Thieves in TL in just a moment. But I do want to shout out or plug our prop sheet. Some of you will know what I'm talking about, and some of you will not have a goddamn clue. JNT and I like to do a prop sheet for every finals, spring, or maybe we just did. I don't know if we did one for summer last year, but anyways, we're doing one for spring, where basically it's going to be free to enter, and you could win some cash. The reason why I'm mentioning it is because we want your guys' Prime subs and all that stuff. Whatever you guys donate or any of the subs that we get, we're just putting that money right back into the prize pool. So if you do want to support us and support the channel, and you're listening on YouTube right now, head over to our Twitch channel, drop a sub, and we will use that cash to hopefully find other people that can figure out about our channel. We usually post it in like on Reddit and in some Discords and stuff like that. And it's honestly just it makes the finals a lot more fun, right? For people that don't have their favorite team in it, it's a lot more interesting if you have different things to cheer for and you have different picks. We do a bunch of wacky stuff. JNT, do you remember any of the stuff that we put in there?
Like the
any,
questions?
Like, fun examples? Yeah. What are the questions that we put in there?
They're kind of like flavorful to like whatever's going on. Like if you guys can remember, like when Tactical was like running it down at the end of like season in season 11 spring, it was like how many times is Tactical going to end? Like I remember
Is
when
he gonna
Power of
do
Evil had
nothing?
like
Is
his
he?
Power of Evil had his like dog shit control only champion pool, stuff like that. But here's what I'll say to put it in the simplest way: like it's free entry and you can win money, and it
Yeah.
takes about 5 minutes. So keep an eye out. We're gonna make the prop sheet. We'll probably try to post it right after next weekend, so you can access it throughout the whole week. And you can fill it out whenever. We usually close the submissions right before the Saturday series is supposed to start. But keep an eye out for it. It's literally free money if you want it, and it's just a bit of fun.
It will be in our Discord. Last week we plugged our Discord and we didn't have the command working in chat. It
Yeah,
is
it
now
broke or
working.
something.
Exclamation point Discord should work now. So if you want to join the Discord, we will be posting it in there and there's discussion and blah, 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 blah. But please do consider participating in that. I think you guys will enjoy it.
Free money.
Okay, let's talk about 100 Thieves and TL now. Should we just get right into the predictions, or how do you want to do this?
Ooh, I mean, we can. I want to hear yours first.
I am taking 100 Thieves. Am I crazy, JNT?
No, because I almost took him.
Almost. Okay, so you're going TL. So I'm going 3-2. What are you going?
I'm going TL with the 3-2.
Ah, okay. Who do you want me to start, or you want to start?
Hey,
Why do you
you
want
can
me to go?
Yeah.
So, I have to look at the top lane when I think about the advantages here, because I've been pretty vocal that I don't think Bwipo has been playing up to the level that we've expected of him. Well, especially since how he was performing at the start of the split. Bwipo, I'll remind people, was like, he was MVP candidate. He may have even been the favorite. I don't remember exactly, but he was up there. It was basically like Bwipo and Summit and Someday and maybe Blabber. I don't really remember. And then Bwipo kind of just fell out of that conversation, and we haven't seen that level of Bwipo for probably over a month now. And he's actually, I mentioned last week, I did not think he had a really good playoff series. Last week. His games 2, 3, and 4 were pretty bad in that best of 5 series, and so I'm kind of wondering, like, I guess I believe a lot more in Someday, who's been solid all split long, than Bwipo. So that's one area where I look at an advantage. I also give the slight advantage to Closer, even though I just think Santorin is not too far behind him. I still think Closer is an absolute monster, and there is that clutch factor to him. So you can't ignore that. Abadage, I'm ready to buy. God damn, this could be where I really eat my words, but I've been waiting to buy in on Abadage pretty much all split long because he was quite bad. I think he's shown enough that I can give him some faith. JNT, feel free to flame me for that. And then I think their bot lane is starting to play better as well. Do I think their bot lane is better than TL? No, honestly, I don't. But I do think that overall, I give 100 Thieves the slight edge for the reasons that I mentioned.
Yeah, I do think, to talk about the top lane, I do think that, a similar game plan can be instituted against Bwipo. And should, Bwipo sort of be left on an island to do whatever he wants and, there not be a whole lot of jungle intention toward top side, I think Bwipo can be a fairly exploitable player. But to where I sort of will, frame that argument and actually, it helps TL a little bit more than it did, against Summit with Cloud9, as it's kind of been identified that Summit's champion pool, at least, it's not, you could call it narrow, but at best, it's not wide. Like, he's got a pretty select few champions that he can perform really, really well on, and he'll smash anybody. But then the rest, he's pretty good. I mean, he hasn't shown to be like absolutely insane at any of these other picks. But whereas Bwipo, I think he's got the champion ocean of top lanes. Like, I mean,
why Bwipo happy?
Yeah, like, dude, we see him literally play whatever the fuck he wants. Like, I'm just trying to think about this split. Like, in Lock-In, we saw him play Volibear, Pantheon, Camille, I think, in the split. He played Viego, he played Lucian, he played Gragas, he played Ornn, he played Malphite. I mean, that's just like 13 champions I just named off, but like, there's definitely more that I'm missing, probably including some of the other meta ones. Like, he played Graves, he played Gnar. I mean, did he play a Gnar game? Maybe he didn't play Gnar, but he played a lot of Graves. But my point is that Bwipo's got a very wide champion pool, and it's very advantageous in a best of 5 scenario to have that advantage. Specifically when, I think TL has been like, I mean, we'll talk about 100 Thieves, what I'll say to them real quick is like, they're a very red-sided team. Like I said, they played 15 out of their 18 games in the regular season on red side. And I also think that TL is also a problem on red side. When you give counterpick to these players like Bwipo, to the players like Bjergsen, it's just like this series feels like a very red-sided, favored matchup to me, because like whoever's going to get counterpick in the solo lanes will mostly likely run show in the solo lanes. So top lane, I think I would give the slight advantage to Someday, but the rest of the map, I do kind of favor TL. I think, Santorin and Closer are both really, really great players, but they kind of provide different things to their team. Santorin's a very early game focused jungler who likes to go to his lanes early and often, specifically mid lane. I swear to God, like if Trundle gets picked in the series, if 100 Thieves gets surprised by a mid gank, like I'm gonna lose my mind because, dude, I'd say it every time. Like whenever Santorin plays Trundle, he level 3 ganks mid without fail. Like it happens every game. So like they should know what's coming at them. And Closer is just, he's more about playing for himself and like using that gold and just, getting objectives and smurfing in team fights. And I think to your last point, like EL's bot lane is way, way, way better at the current moment
Really? Eh?
than
I mean,
Cloud9's
they are
bot lane.
better.
No, than
Oh,
Cloud9's bot lane.
Cloud9.
So like if you look at that
Whoa.
matchup, like dude, but what my point is like if you're gonna send all this pressure topside to try to exploit Bwipo, I feel like the same thing is just gonna happen bot side in favor of Team Liquid. So I think this series is very close. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think 100 Thieves is a very strong team. All their players right now are playing really well, if not better than towards the start of the split. Some days great. Closer is great. Abadagi is looking better, and their bot lane's looking better. But like, EL's bot lane has been looking good. Bjergsen has been looking really good lately. Santorin's been looking good, and Bwipo is, I think, the big question mark in this series. But I think it's close. But I'll go with the 3-2.
Do you worry at all about Closer doing to Bwipo what he did to Summit, or is that just not comparable?
What, just in terms of like throwing all
like hard stomping top lane, just living in the top lane? Because
yeah, he
I mean,
could.
Bwipo has been pretty susceptible to ganks. That's one of the areas where I'm a little bit worried for TL.
I agree, but kind of like
I still feel nervous predicting that like Bwipo's gonna get smashed. Like he's still one of the better top laners in our league, and so I am nervous with that prediction. But I can't ignore that. I just think that 100 Thieves has the edge up there, and I think it matters a lot.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a very possible outcome. But like I said, in terms of what Santorin does for his team and what he provides is just like hella focus on getting advantages in the early game. And I think he, in the past and currently, has been very good at just sort of like on the fly jungling with like, if this is going on the map, like this is what I need to do either to like counter this play or to respond and make a play on the opposite side of the map. And I just think that if 100 Thieves is going to throw the kitchen sink at top lane to try to shut down Bwipo like they did at Summit, I feel like TL can adjust and make those changes that C9 couldn't with flipping the script on bot lane and getting their bot lane ahead. Because like, dude, we literally haven't said this guy's name yet. 4JJ is a fucking monster, bro.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, he's the master of going top lane and counter ganking or like setting up random level 4 dives 3v1.
That guy shows up top lane just randomly. He does. I will say that who he does that a little bit as well.
Honestly,
it's not really
I've convinced myself to change to a 3-1 TL.
Oh, okay. Anyways, I was gonna say that who he does roam a fair bit as well. It's not nearly as comparable to how effective Core JJ is. I don't really think anyone could, honestly, when I'm thinking about it, like no one really compares to Core JJ's ability to roam. But I guess I'm just saying it's not completely absent from 100 Thieves. Like it is. There's a world where who he pulls off a gank top as well. One last thing I'll say on the series is, and I know this is kind of boring, but I think whatever mid laner gets Ari has a big advantage. I've said it many times that like I think Ari's pretty good, and we've seen a lot of mid laners have success with it. We mentioned Olive and Tukui looked better on it, and honestly, Bjergsen and Abadage both have looked really good on the Ari as well. And so hopefully, I honestly kind of just want to see that champion banned. And so it's like, what else you got, because, well, I mean, they're both playing the shit out of it, aren't they? If I remember right.
Yep.
I know Bjergsen's been, and I'm pretty sure Abba has also.
Ari's broken.
Yeah, ban it. Yeah, that's the other thing. On the TriCast, they're not sold on Ari, but like, dude,
this champion's fucking fucked. Like,
that's what I think. I think the champion's good, man, but whatever. Maybe someone will play Veigar into it. We'll have to wait and see.
So you got 3-2-100. I will take the 3-1. I'll switch it to 3-1 because my argument convinced myself that TL is just the better team.
JNT's sitting there like, guys, I am so 5-head. I've convinced myself. Like, hey, I'm so smart.
Just you wait. We'll come back with the perfect predictions part 2.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. You know what, though? Okay, you may have the perfect predictions from this past weekend, but as far as the predictions on all the series, I have perfect predictions so far these playoffs. So
yes, that's true. That's true.
Take that.
That's true. I feel like we could be different on the next series, however.
I know. I feel like, man, and oh god,
and maybe that's a bit of a spoiler because
I'm not backing down. Yeah, I'm not backing down. Okay, C9 EG. Let's get into that, right?
So I'll just kick it off. I got C9 on the 3-2.
Yeah, I got EG 3-2.
Okay. I mean, I am expecting like two very competitive series for this weekend because I do think these teams are very, equal relative skill.
I do feel like I'm taking the upset here, but I want to stick with it. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm too stubborn.
Yeah,
Maybe I have too much faith with EG. I don't know.
I mean, I guess if you were to compare like I guess what I would say is like if I'm trying to think from EG's perspective, like what is their game plan going into the series? Because I
Bot
don't,
lane.
yeah, and I think that's understandable because I don't think that Cloud9 or that EG has any advantages over Cloud9 that isn't bot lane. I think top lane, despite Summit's struggles, I would favor him over Impact.
Hmm.
I would favor Blabber over Inspired, and I would favor Fudge over Jojo Pune. Although I do think that JoJo has had a couple of good weekends back to back in terms of having a lot more impact in the early game in a more positive way than a negative way where he's dying a lot. I do think that JoJo's been playing a lot better. Similar to Inspired. Inspired has been playing a little bit better. But on the flip side, I will say Impact has not been looking that great as of late.
Yes, I agree, but I
And
think you could say that about a lot of the Cloud9 members as
I,
well.
I think you can too. But I just think that, like, pound for pound, I think I'd give the advantage to EG in their bot lane for sure because I think Danny is looking really, really good, in my opinion, and I think Vulcan is being slept on just a tiny bit. Just in
Yeah.
terms of not necessarily like him being insane or anything, but just like the value that he brings to EG and how he works with the EG squad is really good. But to me, I think the focus, similar to the TL 100 Thief series, is this mid lane matchup and Ari, because I think both of these players have been really successful on the Ari. I think that will be a very contested pick, and it would be very interesting to see how the other team approaches, potentially countering the Ari, because JoJo has been like pretty aggressive player in terms of what he likes to pick into these kinds of things. We've seen him on Silas into Ari once before. We saw him whip out the blind pick Azir in Game 4 this past weekend, whereas Fudge has been like much more kind of control mage focused. We've seen some Orianna from him, a lot of Victor as of late, and primarily the Ari. So I'm expecting mid lane to be like super, super contested, especially in the early game. If I had to predict beforehand, I expect to see hella mid ganks.
Yeah, is this I'm sorry if I'm going off on a random little tangent here. Is this like one of the best series as far as trash talk is concerned?
Probably. I mean, like Fudge was like shit talking them and like
Vulcan, Jojo, Fudge, like those guys are all
yeah.
pretty. Yeah, I think that's where I'm kind of most excited. I'm just so excited for this weekend, honestly. Like when you compare this weekend that's coming up to the weekend we just had, it's not even close, man. It's not even close. Um, but I do agree that, like, look, I think Fudge. There's a lot of people saying that Fudge is overrated. I've seen the last few weeks now, some Hotline League takes, mind you, so take that for what it is. Saying that like they think Fudge is overrated, and I don't know, maybe a little bit, but I don't even think so, honestly. Like this weekend, I thought Fudge looked great. Yes, okay, we talked about the Victor already earlier, but also like even on the LeBlanc, like he put out a lot of pressure. You know what his LeBlanc looked like? It looked like any other LeBlanc that you've seen in the past that gets ahead. Whereas you're putting out a lot of pressure and a lot of damage, and then you eventually one shot someone and you take an objective. That's exactly what he did on it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, he's a new mid laner and all, but like he's playing some of these premier picks that in a way that you would expect any normal mid laner to play them. So I know I took EG and whatnot, but I do think it's fair to argue that Fudge looked great this past weekend and that guy is still a weapon.
Yeah.
Can't ignore that.
I guess to quickly talk about the EG side of things for me, because I do think that Cloud9 hasn't really shown their ability to kind of play the more scaling route as of late. I know that was
Mm.
something that they were heavily, heavily, on towards the middle of the season, where they were just playing like a ton of Jinx and Aphelios for Berserker, and he was just straight up like 1v9ing a lot of team fights where he was just dishing out maximum damage. But they've kind of flipped over to this like early / mid game style where they're picking like the MF, they're picking the Zeri. Honestly, I'm not really a big fan of Zeri anymore. It kind of gets banned every single game, but like haven't really seen like Zeri do a whole lot. And like maybe that's just because like, dude, I'm kind of jumping on this bandwagon of like NA like Zaya and NA Zeri that they were kind of talking about on the co-streams. Cause like,
Yeah.
dude, honestly, like whenever I see Zaya and NA, it just looks like dog shit. And like I'll go and watch like highlights from other regions and like they're just shitting on people with this pick because like they know exactly what they need to do in team fights, specifically like ult flashing forward and like maximizing their Q spams. Like I don't know, like the AD carry meta right now is like super super weird for me, and I think it's kind of been like disadvantageous for Cloud9 because they've been going this way more like early to mid game focused route. And that's part of maybe the problems when one of the reasons they swapped out Isles for Winsome was because they're playing these early mid game strats and failing their early mid game plays. So Berserker really can't do a whole lot in the late game. So one area where I am a bit concerned is if EG just opts to pick like this Jinx Tom Kench style or like Aphelios Tom Kench or like this just hella late game style and Cloud9 just like doesn't respond with the late game carry of their own, like I'm kind of worried for them because like they haven't really Cloud9 just doesn't interact with bot lane. And to do that against EG, I think is a mistake.
So I agree with the Zeri and Zaya thing. I do agree with that. The thing for me specifically with Zeri is like, okay, Lamau LP said it a second ago. What did he say? He said if it goes late enough, Zeri just takes shit over, but it takes so fucking long, and I agree with that. And when I look at that, I'm like, just freaking pick Jinx instead. Like Jinx is
Yeah,
still
no,
a
I
monster
agree.
of a champion.
Jinx is
Like that
fucked.
champion is still busted. Even we have some pretty solid Aphelios players. Like play that. Like there's nothing wrong with playing what's been meta for the last 4 months or whatever. If they're still top tier, I don't know. I don't hate the Zeri. It's just like I think there's better picks than it. So yeah, that's my look on it. And I mean, we saw Danny on the Jinx as well this weekend.
Even
He's a beast
Ezreal,
on
like
that.
I think Ezreal's like kind of underrated. Like every time I see that champion, like it's just doing so much fucking damage. Like, but I mean,
Danny's
like
a beast on that
I know,
too.
but Danny and Berserker, like they play a lot of Ezreal,
Yeah.
and I mean it's Korean Ezreal, so like it just does more damage in general. So
Yeah, I guess if what I'm taking EG in this series, I guess I'm really heavily relying on Danny because I don't think you can predict EG in this series without hoping for the bot lane to deliver. Because I
yeah,
don't know if anywhere else is consistent enough to, to really take over. So yeah, I guess I'm really relying on Danny. We'll see if so far the nerves haven't really got to him.
yeah,
I
and I
think
mean
so far him and JoJo have looked pretty good, and that's one of the concern with like the really young guys, right? Is that the nerves of being on stage with fans and all that stuff. Maybe pressure gets higher as playoffs go on. I don't know. We'll see. But so far he's looked pretty damn good.
yeah, it's just for me like Cloud9 hasn't shown the ability to really play through bot lane and whether that means like get their bot lane insanely ahead or shut down the enemy bot lane. And I just don't think you can do that against EG because they team fight really well, and Danny and Vulcan are just kind of a beast.
Yeah.
To me, the problems for EG lie in their mid jungle and JoJo, potentially like being a bit too cocky and Inspired being a little bit AFK because you kind of look on the flip side with Blabber and Fudge, like they are just kind of early to mid game playmakers. Like that's what they like to do. They like to get priority and make some plays happen. And I think if EG takes the back seat in this series, they might find themselves behind quite quickly.
Okay. So what was your prediction again? I got EG 3-2.
Three
But
two
what
C
did what did
nine.
you
It's
had 3-2
close.
C9?
It's
Okay.
very close to me. Like, and the main reason why I have the 3-2 is because their bot lane it's not their same bot lane from before, and they still like show me a
Yeah,
game where
it's a
show me a
question
game
mark.
where C9 bot lane is winning lane.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an important question mark to point out because you don't know how that's going to work. Now, J&T, is it time to get into the Champions queue stuff?
Yep.
Dun dun dun. All
You get
right,
these
look.
logos off the damn screen.
There has been a lot of discussion about Champions queue, and rightfully so. I mean, I don't know how many weeks in a row it is for us talking about it, but it seems like every week there's a new, I don't know if I should call it development, but just opinions being thrown around. So, real quick, I will say that I am not quite as aggro as the double lifts, the Olays, and the Svens, but I'm not far
And the
off, I
Lorlo.
don't think. Yeah, all the people, honestly. The thing is, I don't think I'm very far off from where they're at. The only place where it's different for me is I don't mind players taking a break. I'm just a little bit worried about how long that break is, and I think that's most of the concern with most of the fans and the other players like Doublelift and all them. It's like, well, how long is this break going to last? If you told me they were taking a week or two off as a break, fine. But I mean, something tells me that this break might last a month or maybe a month and a half, and that's the problem. Is like people don't know, and I think that's where people get impatient. Is when they're like, "How long is this break going to last?" Because this is something the region is really heavily relying on, and not only that, I think that if people aren't queuing for Champions Queue, you've made the region worse now because now you're only getting an hour or one game per hour, but also solo queue is also worse. Like people are going to have to go back to solo queue, but not the whole solo queue pool is there now because some are in champions queue, some are in solo queue. So in a way, like this could have made the region worse in a way, and that's where they're starting to get all this panic, right? The other thing too, in why I think there's also some um, disappointment from fans and other players is like, I don't know if we'd be having this discussion if it was Korea or China, and that's where everyone points to like, look, if you want to compete with these regions, you need to be able to do what these regions do as far as their work ethic goes. And I don't think there's any concern that if Champions Queue existed in those regions, that this discussion would even be happening. People would be queuing up like fucking crazy. And so that's where people get frustrated, and I don't blame them at all for having that frustration.
Yeah. I'll what's the fucking word I'm trying to say? I will preface my kind of whole, not maybe not my whole opinion, but I'll preface this by saying I think the Doublelift video that he put out on his second channel, where he talks about Champions Queue for about an hour, um, I thought was a really good video, and I actually agree with
Me
pretty
too.
much everything that he has to say. Specifically, when it comes to the point with the public don't understand the perception of Champions Queue and why it was created in the first place, because some players, or sorry, a lot of people in the community like to come up with all these various reasons why players aren't playing it, and the kind of the things that were put in place to attempt to motivate these players, like for example, like having the prize pool or having it being like a localized server with like the best of the best, and like that's one of the reasons why it's so good. And I think Doublelift, says the valid point. Like the main draw for Champions Queue for pro players in the first place was for it to be a low ping environment. And
Hmm.
I personally, I cannot, I cannot really say like how bad 60 ping is compared to 5 ping, because they play when they're playing like official matches, they play on 5 ping, and when you're playing solo queue from Los Angeles, you get around 60 ping. Like normally I play kind of around like 30 to 40 ping. So, but I used to play like way back in the day, I played like 70 ping, and I know that was like giga terrible. So I can't exactly like 100% like say I know what I'm talking about when it comes to like high ping versus low ping. But the main sentiment of a lot of the pro players was this is an environment where we can create a low ping environment to make sure that players are maximizing their ability to learn the game from a mechanical standpoint. Because
Hmm.
one of the things that players would always say when they went to these other various regions, whether we were boot camping in EU or boot camping in China or boot camping in Korea, one, the solo queue is great because you just have good players, but the main thing is your mechanics just get insane because you're just able to play on the sloping environment and play against these other great players. And when people kind of are consistently bringing up the fact of like, oh well, like these these like, why aren't players playing when there's like this cash incentive? And I think once again, when Doublelift talks about like a lot of these players are making bank anyway, so like this cash incentive is not that big to them, and I think that it's kind of misleading a lot of people, and that like the problems with it, in my opinion, are like it's just a break. Like you kind of just talked about it right now. Like people are on a break. The season is over. When like I'll make an example to traditional sports. When your season is over in traditional sports, the first thing you do is you don't like go back on the field or you go back on the court and start practicing. You take a bit of a break because your body needs to break, your mind needs to break. And obviously, I think some people will bring up the point like, well, the great players, they don't take breaks. Like they'll work tirelessly throughout the offseason. And I think that's completely fair. And if you want to be a great player and be the best player and be the best player in your region, best player of all time, whatever, like you need to practice more than other people. But I just think that for the average player, like people need to accept that they're not playing this game 24/7. Like it's a job, and like you need to take breaks in your job. So
Yeah.
I just think it's a little bit weird to choose right now. Um, we're talking about people not playing Champions Queue when the offseason has just started for a majority of teams. Like right now, as of today, 6 of the 10 LCS teams are not. They're not like in the. They're not in this. They're not in the series. Like they're not in playoffs. Like they're taking a
Yeah.
break, bro. Like
Well, and let me back you up a little bit on why the breaks are important because I do think every single year we see this from the teams that go to MSI that usually don't end up taking a break. By the time they come back from MSI, we see it every year. The teams end up struggling because they are burnt out in summer, right? So that's something that actually happens. So I do agree with you that it's important to take a break. But like I mentioned before, how long is this break going to last? That's a problem. Now, I want to get into what some of the solutions might be for this because right now all we're hearing is just queue up forehead like Don't get me wrong, I understand saying that, but that's not really a solution. And let's be clear, I don't think there is one solution to this, and I don't think any of the solutions for that matter are obvious. But I think it's time we start throwing out some solutions or some ideas, because right now, just queue up forehead is not working clearly. So the one thing that I want to get into is, and this is actually something Lena mentioned in the video, and I think she actually makes a really good point. She makes the point that some of these players that are on like the lower tier teams, like Dignitas, or I think she was talking about Biofrost, for example, or Aframu, I think was the examples that she was using. Like these are players that are not going to be signed by your Team Liquids or your Cloud Nines, for example. Like it's just not going to happen anymore. They're way past that time for that to happen. So their incentive of getting better isn't necessarily there, but also they're not bad enough for people to take their spots. And so I was like, okay, Lena, you're actually making sense here. That makes a lot of sense. So what do you do about that? And this is where I think pros would not like this, but I think you need to open up Champions Queue to more players, even not even necessarily at all times. I wonder if it's possible to have a sort of like reserve player list for when there are times that players need to take a break. You could add X, Y, Z players to the list so that there are more games happening. Because yes, solo queue is bad, and yes, Champions Queue would be worse if you add just a bunch of players to it. But Champions Queue would still be better if you had comms with those worst players than going right back into solo queue. No matter what, I think the Champions Queue version is always a better way to. It's a better way to improve than solo queue is altogether. And so, yes, pros will not like it when they hear that some other players that aren't, pros get into Champions Queue. But I think that's the only solution you have right now. And what that also does is it kind of tackles the idea of what Lena was talking about. At least some of these players get the time to practice and play in that much better environment, so that maybe Afro, or I mean, I don't think Afro and Bio need replacing, but those are the examples she uses. But so that those players do eventually get replaced. Like you need to have an environment where people can get up to that level for those players to be incentivized to get better themselves. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
So go ahead.
well, I guess wait, I literally just totally forgot what I was gonna say.
I'll just finish off by saying, like, I think Lena is right that there's not really any threat to these people losing their jobs, like the lower tier LCS players, and the only way to do that is to help the community get better. And by doing for the community to get better, I think you have to let some of them into Champions Queue.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
I know you don't want to flood it with all Masters Plus players, otherwise it's not really much different than solo queue. But you have to let in some more players, or there's no games getting played, and that's just worse for everyone.
yeah, I mean, I remember when they initially announced Champions Queue, like they made a point to say they were going to allow players who are Masters Plus, they then changed that to Grandmaster Plus to
Yeah.
apply to get into Champions Queue. And to apply, you had to pass like specific requirements in terms of like you can't be a one trick, so you have to have like a certain number of games on a certain number of different champions. You couldn't be like a 1, 2, or 3 trick. I think was the main thing that they were kind of looking for. And from what I remember, like I don't recall like any new players getting added in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the
Well,
other
and
like
sorry.
did you ever like hear of any players that like got accepted into Champions Queue? Like I know that there was a ton of players whom I guess I'll point one out, Tarzan, who was like basically crying on Twitter like every single day when Champions Queue was out that like I'm not allowed to be in Champions Queue and I would actually queue up whatever.
Yeah, but tough shit for him. He's a toxic prick.
Yeah, I
There, I'll
mean
say
like dude,
it.
like sorry, like the
The
how you
environment is
how
for
you
players
ruined
to
your
get
career
better.
is
Yeah,
like not helping here.
the environment is for pro players to get better, and by having someone who's as toxic as Tarzan, I think he is like maximum toxic. I do not think that helps the player environment, especially the players that are already hesitant to play in the first place. I don't think adding Tarzan helps at all with the scenario. But you do have to add some players, and so you're going to have to pick and choose which ones are best. And that's where I go back to the idea of I think it would be valuable to have a sort of like reserve list. Whereas, like, you have these people that will definitely be interested in playing Champions Queue, and those are the people that you can rely on when Champions Queue is a lot slower. You could say, this week and this week, we're opening it up to the players that are left on the reserve list or whatever, and then they get their chance. And like, this is your time to like prove that you belong in Champions Queue. And then maybe if you have a good performance, maybe the next time you apply, you can get into Champions Queue for good or whatever. There needs to be a way of getting these players in that's not just solo queue, because I don't even think solo queue is really a good um it's not really a good way of accurately depicting who is actually good anymore, because like we mentioned before, it could just be a bunch of one tricks that just hit high rank as being one trick. So I think there needs to be an area to get more players into Champions Queue and really put pressure on the guys that have been there for I don't even know how long, that aren't really, grinding for their spot anymore.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that like kind of caused this whole downfall, even before like the LCS season sort of ended and teams were getting eliminated from playoff contention, was that just the number of people who were queuing up started to sort of decline, and it kind of just became like a really cynical like cycle where, well, less players are queuing up, so games are taking longer and queue times are taking longer, and then because queue times are taking longer and games are taking longer to find, like people started to play less and less and less, and I think that's exactly where kind of what you're saying is like at a certain point, like you got to let some new players in to make sure that these games are constantly flowing on this on like a an even basis. So like I guess the example that I would bring up is one thing that a lot of people have talked about with regards to Champions Queue is that the role distribution in terms of the numbers of players that are queuing up is heavily skewed to like solo lanes. Like there's not a lot of solo laners queuing up, and you see a lot of AD carries queuing up, you see a lot of supports queuing up, and you see a lot of junglers queuing up, and quite often there's players who need to autofill to mid or top. And I think that's exactly where, like, if you were one of the people who was like on the I don't remember what they called it, like the Champions Queue, like the board or whatever, but like kind of who like I think Bjergsen was on it and a couple other players were on it maybe, but like that is where you probably need to sit down every week or maybe every 2 weeks and kind of look at the data of like, okay, well we have, out of a total of 10 players on a specific team, once we get a game going, there's like 4 extra AD carries that still haven't gotten into a game, and like there's like 2 extra junglers, 1 extra support, like, and then there's no other solo laners, and like at that point you need to try to open up Champions Queue and add in maybe a few other solo laners who'll be able to keep these games flowing, because it seems like one of the main reasons why a lot of people stopped playing was because of these long queue times, and I think that's just naturally been because of the distribution of players by position and them not willing to add in some other players. And it just unfortunately has just become this cycle where when the queue times are taking longer, like you're just less incentivized to queue up because you could rather just play a solo queue game. In the
Yes.
like Doublelift was saying, like he would play a 20-minute Champions Queue game and then be in queue for 45 minutes plus for the next one. And he just said like, well, in that time I could have just played 2 solo queue games. And like, yeah, while those games might have been lower quality because they're solo queue and not Champions Queue, at least I'm playing and I'm doing something and I'm not just sitting here with my hand up my ass.
And I think I've seen a lot of players be asked whether they think more players should be let into Champions Queue, and they pretty much always say no. And it's like, well, dude, clearly the status quo is not working, so you got to make something happen. You got to change something, because right now no one's using it. So while I do think Doublelift would not be happy hearing that worse players are getting in, it's still right now that's the only fix that I could see. Maybe there's other. Maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe give it a month and maybe everyone's back in playing Champions Queue. Maybe we're
That's
all on panic mode a little bit too soon. But I don't. The thing is, I think Mark Z said this tonight on Hotline League, and I totally agree. He said something along the lines of like, "I'd rather overreact early than not react and then just watch this thing slowly die off." Because like this is all something that everyone really cares about, and we're really leaning on this new environment to improve the league. Because God, do we need it? As our international performance have shown us, we need something for our region to improve. So that's why everyone's going full panic mode.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like what I was, kind of talking about at the beginning. Like players are on a break right now. And my main indicator would be let's come back and look at these sort of numbers in a month or two. Maybe not even 2 months, like maybe 2 months is too long, but like I looked it up when we were talking about this prior, but the summer split starts on June 18th. So if we should make a safe assumption that players and teams are going to start really getting back into the swing of things 1 month before, or maybe 1.5 months before the split starts, that is our indication of when we should start looking at Champions Queue again in terms of the number of players that are queuing up. Because yes, while it is looking a little bit doomed in terms of like there being really low activity in Champions Queue, let's go back in like a month or a month and a half, and like if we're back to kind of what we were reaching previously, I'll be fine with that. And I mean, once again, to point out, to kind of correlate to a great point that Doublelift made in his video, one thing that he was saying was, the most important times for the regular season was right at the end of the regular season, and there was like a clear correlation with when it was getting up to towards the end of the regular season, and the last week being super important in terms of teams for playoff seeding, and obviously there was that like huge tiebreaker going on for like 3rd to 4th place or 3rd to 6th place. that was when Champions Queue was at one of its peaks, and there was a lot of players playing a lot of games on all these various teams, and it was very clear when the season ended and teams started to get eliminated from playoffs. Like that first week, like 4 teams got eliminated, and it was obvious in the stats. Like I'm pretty much on all 4 of those teams. None of their players are playing Champions Queue, and I think you'll see a similar thing if we look at the data from next week. Like FlyQuest and Golden Guardians players probably aren't going to play. Golden Guardians maybe not because like Ole and Pride Stalker are like 2 of the like
They grind.
most played.
Yeah.
They're like the highest like players in terms of number of games. But I don't know. Like it just feels really weird to criticize and like go maximum flame mode when we're not going to be getting accurate data at this current time. And I don't know. I think the problems are visible and they should be talked about. But I just think to the extent that it's being like punched down everyone's throat is just like kind of crazy. Like let's just slow down a little bit and kind of regroup in about a month.
And the thing is, one of my concerns is like with everyone saying Champions Queue's dead, Champions Queue's dead. I hope that doesn't lead to everyone just accepting that it's dead, because then people will still like. I don't think things will change in a month, right? If everyone's just accepted it's dead and everyone thinks it's actually dead for good, then it might not pick up again. And you're probably going to need some of the more influential voices to get it going again in say a month or whenever the hell it is. And you'll probably need people like Lorlo and Doublelift and Ole doing this, and Sven saying the same things they've been saying, but like, look, guys, Split is starting now. Like, we need to get back into this really soon, or else like Champions Queue's really gone for good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that could be a nightmare, right? So you're gonna need the influential voices to continue to be those voices when we get closer to the summer split.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyways, lots of concern. I think it's warranted. And in short, I guess my recommendation is you need to open it up, have a reserve list at the very least. You need some way of getting more players in there, because I don't have any other options right now. Maybe that doesn't even work, but I know that what's working right now is not working. So try something different. I am always a strong believer in if the status quo ain't working, do something else. So that's where I'm at with.
Yeah, I guess last point that I'll say in terms of like a possible fix quickly is, a lot of the players have sort of kind of voiced their opinion that the LP system isn't very good.
Yes.
And I think, they're correct in that because it just heavily skews to playing more games because it's straight up plus 10 LP for a win, minus 5 LP for a loss. And very often when you look at the leaderboards, the players who are playing the most games are on the top of the leaderboard. And another point that Doublelift was making is that like Champions Queue should be something where like players get a little bit egotistical and say, "Oh yeah, I'm rank 1 Champions Queue, bitch. I'm insane." And like I think that's a very like fair statement, but at the same time, the system is a little bit flawed because you're going to have these players who are playing Champions Queue all day every day, like your RJSs, your Lorlos, if you like a big grinder like Ole and Pride Stalker and play it, literally like they'll grind the whole day. Like it is going to be skewed towards those players, and you're going to have your other players that are like your top pro players in your region that just simply don't have that ambition to climb the ladder just because from the get-go they're already at a disadvantage because these other guys are going to be able to play more often than they are. And
right.
I think that still is a problem though. If like if a player's just accepting, it's like, oh, I'm not going to get it anyway, so like I'm not going to bother to play. Like that's a problem. But should the MMR and LP system be changed to sort of just favor higher win rate as opposed to number of games played, I think that'll definitely motivate more players to be like, to want to get rank 1 because rank 1 Champions Queue or even just top 10 Champions Queue should be something that is like a goal and like have some like value attached to it in terms of like,
there's some pride there. That's something that Doublelift talks about in that video. He says like there should be some. He doesn't say the word pride. He struggles to find it, but I know that's the word he's trying to say. He's like, you should have pride in what you're doing. Like you should be proud if you hit rank 1. He talks about ego and how it's like sometimes it's good to have ego. The word he's looking for is to have pride in what you do. If you commit your life to a game, do it the best you fucking can, man. Like.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyways, I agree. I think you're right about like the point system. Like, should that be a deterrent from people to play? No, it shouldn't be a deterrent, but the people that are organizing Champions Queue should take away every single excuse possible. And if players are asking for a better LP system, do your best to give it to them.
I don't even like why did they even design that in the first place? Like have them
just
at
to
like
incentivize more games, but clearly it hasn't necessarily. I mean, it's done that for some people, but it hasn't forever.
I just feel like a better system would have been like set everybody to like 300 and then just have it be plus 10 minus 10 or plus 5 minus 5. Like I don't know, like
Anyways,
Just weird,
we'll
man.
see. We'll see what they do. Like that's the other thing too is like they're it's still a new thing, right? So I'm personally like I don't mind if they're saying like, look, this is new. We don't want to just make a bunch of sudden changes. It's wait and see how people feel, and then let's make changes. We're starting to see how people feel, so it's like now I'm starting to expect to see some changes, and maybe we don't even see them for the rest of this year. Maybe it's next year if there is a Champions Cup, but
Yeah,
who
I
knows? I'd
mean,
rather see changes sooner rather than later because
like,
obviously, again, back to what I was saying status quo ain't working. Change something.
yeah, the last thing I'll say, because we should probably move on, but like
Hmm.
NA and the LCS is not necessarily known for like using an idea and then running, like sticking with it. Like they quite
Yeah,
often will
true.
just bail out on shit. And I'm a little bit worried that that could just amp up a Champions Queue. Like
Could.
if it turns out to be dead and nobody really is playing it come summer split, like they just might fucking disable it come next year, and that would
Yeah.
be a problem in and of itself if they just straight up give up on it. Because like NA tends to give up on a lot of things.
Yeah. I don't know if I would necessarily say give up. Some things, yes, but some things it's just about changing things to try something different. Like with the formats we've seen, it's not that they give up on the format; it's that people complain and ask for something new. It's like, okay, fine. If people are complaining, let's try something new, and I give credit for that. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. Okay, we've said our piece on that. We've gone plenty about that. So let's talk about. Well, it's quick news time. No, it's. Well, I guess this is kind of quick news, but let's just do the MSI update. Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to kind of give a little bit of an MSI update because MSI is not too far around the corner. I believe it starts third week of May, May 18th or something.
Pretty soon. It was like a month.
I want to like just get my dates correct here. No,
Quickly
it
double
starts
check.
May the 10th.
Oh, so less than a month away then.
Yes. But
Damn.
as of right now, we already have 5 teams that have qualified for MSI.
Which
Um
teams are they, JNT?
Well, we'll save our EU talk for last,
Okay.
because G2 they just won the summer split with the 3
Yeah.
over Rogue on Sunday. However, T1 we already know is qualified. They beat Genji 3-1 in the finals. But just this past week, the TCL, which is the Turkish region, the Istanbul Wildcats are going to be the MSI representative. They went to MSI last year as well. I don't know if their roster is similar or will have a lot of the same players. Maybe we'll go through that at some point leading up to MSI. Another familiar face, Detonation Focus Me, out of Japan in the
Mm.
LJL. Once again, I presume they have a similar roster because that roster that they've had for the most part is like been with them for quite a long time. Although I do know that their mid laner Arya, who was with them last year, is actually over in the LCK now. They probably have a different mid, or they obviously have a different mid. And then last up, out of Oceania, which is no longer the OS, is the LCO. Order is the team that qualified over there. I
They
looked at
beat
their
the
roster.
Chieftains.
Yeah, they beat the Chiefs. Yeah, the only person that I recognized on this roster was BioPanther, who I think was at like Worlds in 2010 or something. So that's about it.
Lamau LP correcting you. It's still OS. The
Well,
region
but I
is
mean
still
the
OS.
the acronym is not like whatever. That's what I
Like
meant.
you
Sorry,
said, he
the
said it's not
acronym was
LC. It's
yeah,
LCO, not OPL. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I knew what you meant, but it's nice that we have Lamau LP because I know he's an OS guy. It's good to have him in the chat to be ready to correct you or myself when needed. Yeah, I guess they beat those chieftains. I know they're not
yeah,
chieftains, but chiefs or whatever, which had a lot of familiar faces like Race, I believe. And you mentioned some other players earlier, but I already forget them. Okay,
but
let's talk about Europe though.
yeah, talk of the town. G2, they're smurfing the lower bracket. They didn't lose a single game in the lower bracket. They went 12-0. The only games they lost were their original 3-1 to Fnatic, which dropped them to the lower bracket. But, like, dude,
And then they went on a
G2
tear,
just
baby.
smurfed their way through this whole lower bracket and, like, shit stomped Rogue.
So here's the thing. I have to let people know that when I watch these games, first of all, I was like playing catch up all day. I watched everything yesterday. I watched all of LEC. I had to watch C9 Golden Guardians yesterday, and then I had to watch EG FlyQuest. So I was really playing catch up. So yeah, I will admit that like my analytical eye was not the greatest for this series, for the final series rather. But what stood out to me was Caps was absolutely a monster, and that to me was probably my favorite part about it. I mean, I guess maybe Broken Blade as well. JNT knows that I'm a really big Broken Blade fan, so I really like that as well, that he's kind of popping off. But I think it's such a relief for European fans that Caps is looking like Caps again, or Claps, I guess. Uh, he was an absolute monster. And I don't know where this guy's been at, but damn, he's back. And I think that's kind of scary when you see G2 with claps. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, from I was pretty much watching every single G2 series in the LEC playoffs. I'll be honest, I mean, I didn't watch a whole lot of the other series that didn't involve G2, mainly just because I've been sort of a fan of G2 for the last few years now. But to me, watching their games, it just felt like in every single series in the lower bracket, like all 5 players were individually better than the enemy 5 players. And like, I mean, I guess like you kind of look back at the LEC in terms of last year with Mad Lions winning back-to-back championships, and the main thing to talk about with the Mad Lions was their team play was just so good. Like El Yoya was like so dominant when it came to just like early, mid, and late game. Like he was just like the best jungler by far in that region. And to me, when I look at G2 and like the reason why they won their championship was just like every player is just better than the other. And I don't even know if like that means that G2 is the better team, but like it just feels like old G2 where they were just better. Like they're just better. Like
I didn't get to watch the G2 and Fnatic series because I couldn't be here for it. I was really
they,
surprised
they were
at
just
that series
better.
because
Like
I've been saying for like a month, maybe 2 months, that I just thought Fnatic was the best team in the league and that they were going to win. And I don't know what happened. They got swept apparently. Like, okay, I wasn't ready for that.
I mean, yeah, game 2 was really close. Fnatic should have or sorry, game 3, I mean. Game 3 was really close and Fnatic should have won that game. But
I
yeah.
guess Hylissang had a much worse playoff than he did regular season
Yeah.
apparently.
He didn't have a very good playoffs, especially in that series against G2.
Yeah.
But I mean the main
Which
thing
is
that Fnatic
unfortunate because he was a monster in regular season, man. Like Hylissang
yeah,
was really, really
I was
impressive.
surprised he didn't get MVP. They gave it to Vithio. I mean, that's not surprising that
Really?
he didn't get it, but
Yeah, okay, dude. Here's what I'll say. So I didn't know that they actually gave it to VTO, but
Vithio's a beast though.
he is good. But I still think he's overrated. He's still a. Don't get me wrong, guys. He is a very good mid laner. But the problem that I have with him getting it is, first of all, Hylissang was hands down the best player. I watched pretty much every regular season game to split. I thought for sure it was Hylissang. But not only that, it felt like before the season even started, they were trying to give MVP to VTO. I don't know if you remember this. He was tweeting like, "I'm going to be MVP this split," and that like it almost feels like the broadcast was pushing it so hard that they convinced themselves that he was actually the MVP.
Hmm.
I got nothing against him. It's just I don't think he was the like I don't think people realize just what a freaking monster Hylissang was in the regular season. And so it's nothing against Vito. It's just disappointing to me that Hylissang did not get that award because I thought he was a beast.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought it would be Hylissang, but I wasn't necessarily surprised that it was Vithio, just because I mean, I'll admit I didn't watch as much LEC as you, but from what I did see, Vithio is usually always smurfing. I mean,
He's their best player.
I'll
He's their
I'll
best
I'll,
player
I'll
on
bring
Misfits,
I'll
no
bring
doubt.
this up again, like not even to like flex, but just like this is the mid laner I wanted Cloud9 to sign after they got rid of Perks. Like I figured like if they're gonna rebuild their roster, like presumably this was when Fudge was gonna stay top lane. Like I wanted Vithio because like I felt like he was just a straight up beast.
Yeah, he's great. He is, but yeah, I'm surprised that he got him. I'll say that. But anyways, I don't got anything else on this. Let's get to the other quick news. Yeah,
Yep, we got a lot of quick news. We'll
let's
try to
get
keep
through
it
it then.
quick. First up, this is probably the biggest news I would say, but there are rumors that the LPL may have to play MSI remotely due to a bunch of COVID restrictions slash lockdown procedures that are currently in place. And after reading a couple articles about this, it was mainly because both traveling to and from Korea, apparently the Chinese players just have to do like some massive 21-day quarantine there and back.
Oh,
And a lot of the players and orgs are saying that, especially, if you end up being the number one team for the LPL and go, that it's going to heavily hinder their ability to prep for summer split. So it's kind of a lot of the teams in the LPL seem to be pushing for this LPL play remotely because they don't want to sort of derail their prep for summer because, obviously summer, it's the more important split, and especially in the LPL.
yeah. No, I understand that. That would suck though. I mean, I don't have much else to add to it.
Yeah.
That's a rumor, and that sucks.
I
But what
think
can you do, man? What can
I
you do?
think from a couple of the Twitch clips that I heard about, the ping would be somewhere in like the 30s to 40s. If they
That's
did have to
manageable.
play it. So yeah, it's not like you're playing like 100 ping or even 60 ping or something like that. So it would still be somewhat competitive, but it does sort of put an asterisk on the whole thing if China has to play remote. And like, who knows? Like, they could just get shit on, and it just could just be as simple as like, hey, we're playing on 5 ping and you're not. So
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that that's that much, but I would say if it was me, I'd be pretty upset because it's still obviously a disadvantage, right?
hmm.
But
But
anyway.
once again, only rumors, so who knows? LPL teams might be at MSI. Next up, Ryu, former mid laner for 100 Thieves, H2K, Phoenix One. If you forgot about him, guess what? He's back. He completed his 2 years of mandatory military service for South Korea, and he said he wants to join a team as coach.
Yeah, that's
I
cool.
think
Let's
he
go
was
Ryu.
on 100 Thieves as a coach after he, stopped playing as a mid laner. So I would expect this guy to get picked up because he
Do you
was a
think
good
he'll be in
player.
NA or do you think he'll go to Korea?
I don't know. I think even EU, he was in EU for a few years, so I expect this guy to get picked up by a good team because he was a good player and presumably a good coach if he was on 100 Thieves.
I mean, there is a team in the LCS that could probably use more Korean coaches. Just
Hey,
saying.
maybe.
Wouldn't be surprised to hear Cloud9 Ryu, but I mean, I have no evidence of that, but
Next up, speaking of OG players, Vizicachi, your homie, he's signing with Astralis as their new
My
top
homie?
laner. Well, just the homie.
Okay. Don't get me wrong, I got nothing against
Yeah.
Vizicachi as he's there.
He's unfortunately joining the worst team, and he's probably not that good anymore. I mean, he was pretty doggo mode on Peace when they went to Worlds in 2021.
But also, he didn't play with that team, right? He kind of
Yeah,
just
he
got
was he
thrown
was
on
he
last
was an
second.
emergency sub, but I mean,
Yeah,
still, like,
yeah,
he's joining 10th place team. He'll probably be like around there.
yeah. I mean, we'll see. I'll be pleasantly surprised if he's not. That'll be a good thing. So
Well, speaking of top laners, this one obviously much more important. The current rumor flying around is that Nuguri is going to rejoin Damwon Kia after not playing this split and taking a little bit of a
Ooh.
break. From
Yeah,
everything that I heard out of the LCK when it came to Damwon, because I didn't really watch a whole lot of Damwon games, the only time I would have watched them was when Hama Life was playing them or when T1 was playing them, is that Birdall sucks ass.
yeah. It
And
sounds like it's not all working out for them.
that wasn't really a big like surprise in the first place because in the limited amount of time I saw Birdall play at Worlds for Genji, I was like, this guy is not very good. And for him to join Damwon Kia to replace Khan, that is a pretty clear downgrade. And Damwon, I mean, they didn't have the best season, but I don't think that's to their fault because I think that T1 and Genji were just like their rosters were just so much better. I mean, Showmaker and Canyon, don't get me wrong, those guys are fucking cracked. But like, Genji's bot lane is Ruler and Lahens, and T1's bot lane is Gumayushi and Keria. And like, I'm sorry, what's their bot lane's name again? Dukdam and who's the other guy?
I don't remember.
It's the
I haven't
Nunch,
followed
isn't it? The
LCK this year. Is it Beryl that's still there? I don't even
no,
know.
he's on. He's
I
on.
haven't followed LCK this split, man, because
Whatever.
fucking
Just
BDD's long COVID. He's fucking gonzo. So BDD's my boy. I haven't been
yeah.
watching because he
Just
hasn't been playing, and they're trash.
unfortunately for Damwon, the players that they got to replace their former stars just haven't been as good as the rest of the league. So hopefully, this could mean some other positive changes for Damwon. I still expect that this will be a team that makes the Worlds. Showmaker and Canyon on a team, I think, just probably makes them top 3 no matter who the fuck is playing because those guys are just so insane.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't watched LCK, so I don't really have much of an opinion on it.
Yep.
I think it's Pog that Nuguri's back, though. I mean, let's be honest. That's where he looked like an absolute monster. So it sounds like a good thing, but I don't have a lot of information to say much more than that.
Yeah, to flip over back to some more LPL talk, there has been a few oopsies over in there when it comes to the match fixing problem that they seem to
Dude,
have. It's
it's
becoming a
so
problem.
far beyond oopsies at this point, man. This is like we're talking about this every split. It feels like there's a new one. So this is not. I see why you call it oopsies, but it's so far beyond that because it's so
It's a
regular
pattern
now.
now,
Like
yeah.
match fixing is this shit's got to stop, man. These players are going to ruin their careers. Like, do these players not understand just what like they're risking here? Maybe they're making fat bank, but it's still not worth, man. You'll never be able to get on teams like I don't know. I don't know, man.
Yeah, so LGD, one of LGD's mid laners, Jay, he got permabanned for match fixing, and then it was also came out today that Top Esports second AD carry. I don't even remember his name. I didn't even write down his name, but he's been suspected of match fixing. And I'll throw another name in the ring. If you remember Bo, the backup
Yeah.
jungler for FPX, who was behind Tian, who was like a really hype prospect, he, according to Doin B, might be going over to NA with Maple, former Flash Wolves mid laner, former Suning mid laner. I don't even know what team he played on after he left Suning.
Listening to Travis on Hotline League tonight, he seems to think that there's a lot more rumors about Maple and less about Bo. That's what he said. He didn't confirm anything, but he said that the rumors surrounding Maple, he's heard more rumors about that and less about Bo.
Totally forgot. I
Yeah.
was like PSG Talent. He was on that team. I just looked it up. I was like, oh yeah, he's on PSG Talent.
So, anyways, there's some more rumors, and the thing is, you gotta wonder, like, oh, is TSM gonna double dip in the LPL pool?
I mean, at this point, get fucking rid of Kaido and pick up Maple. That sounds good to me.
They're going in again, back to the LPL players. It looks like, but
Mhm.
I mean,
And
anything's
then
got to be better. So
yeah, and then last up, the face of League of Legends, Lol Tyler One.
the face of League of Legends, you're giving that to Tyler One.
I mean, like pretty much, yeah.
I'd give it to Faker, but yeah, I guess.
Well,
Tyler
I
One
guess
is a notable.
he's. Well, I say that because he's proclaimed that he is the face of League of Legends. So
Oh, does he? Okay.
yeah, because dude, like, I
Wow.
mean, come on, like, dude, whenever Tyler
would
One is
say
doing
he's
some
the-
shit, he's getting hella promoted from like the main league, like Twitter and shit
Yeah,
like that.
no, he is. He is.
Sorry, I guess I'll rephrase to the self-proclaimed face of League. I'm pretty sure he also calls himself the face of Twitch as well. In terms of League, I mean.
I'm just curious how much the LCS has got to pay him. I wish
Yeah.
that I don't think we'll ever find out, but I would love to find out.
I didn't even say
Gotta
what
be
was
a lot.
happening about him, but he's apparently going to be at the opening ceremonies for the LCS finals, which are happening in Houston, Texas on April 23rd to 24th. Yeah, dude, I think I remember I said this back in the day when Tyler One kind of was originally brought in to like be on the LCS and be involved in the broadcast. I just think it's ironic as fuck, and it's like kind of
It's
shallow
funny.
that like they're just hella promoting Tyler One after like permabanning him for a year and a half for being
I
a
don't think
toxic
it's
piece of shit.
shallow. So here's the thing. He is still sometimes toxic, and I fucking hate toxicity. But he is nowhere near what he was before. And I do think that people can change. And so while I wish he would change a little bit more, I don't think he would be Tyler One anymore if he wasn't a little bit toxic. Does that make it okay? Not really. But let's be honest, this guy's fucking hilarious. And the LCS needs people to watch. They are desperate because viewership is going away. Every year, viewership is smaller. So, do I like that they promote a guy who's still a little bit toxic? Not really, but I get it.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I admit that I still want to watch whatever it is because Tyler One is there. He's a funny fucking guy. He's hilarious.
yeah, I
He's
mean,
very entertaining.
I think it's smart from the LCS perspective just because a lot of the people who presumably watch Tyler One probably aren't fans of the LCS. And he even kind of says it himself. Like, he doesn't give a fuck that like about anything that's not like him playing the game. Like whenever
Do you think he could
whenever
name
people
10
go into
players?
his what sorry?
Do you think he could name 10 LCS players?
He probably could. I mean, actually, maybe not. I don't know. Current? Probably not. Maybe
Who
former.
do you think he would know? Okay, he would name maybe Afromoo.
Probably Bjergsen. Did you Afromoo? I don't
Bjergsen.
even think so. Like, I would think he would
You
go
think
like.
he would maybe not know Afro?
No, dude. Actually,
Can he name 5 then?
maybe like he could name probably Bjergsen, Doublelift, Core JJ.
Doublelift doesn't play anymore.
Oh yeah, current. Probably Bjergsen, Core JJ. Yeah, dude. I don't think he could. Like, cause like, there's no other like names that really pop out like that anymore.
Impact.
Impact, maybe, yeah.
Anyways.
But here's the thing, like even if you just went into his stream and said like, "Hey Tyler One, like I donated $10," like, "Hey Tyler One, can you name your like top 5 favorite LCS players?" He'd be like, "I don't give a fuck about LCS, fuck that shit." Like that's what he would say. Like anytime somebody comes into his chat and asks him a question about his opinion on something that's not him playing League of Legends, he basically tells him to fuck off, and I think it's funny.
No, you know
But
what he would
the
say?
people
He
people
would
who
say-
watch Tyler One's stream don't seem to me to be like your typical LCS viewers, which is why I think it's smart of Riot to get him on the broadcast in hopes that
Yeah.
like, hey, like, oh, let's just try to bring this whole like bunch of viewers who probably aren't watching our product to come watch our product because we're having Tyler One on it.
Especially if it's a banger series, you could actually make some fans out of that. So
Yeah, maybe.
yeah. I bet you if you were to do the donation thing, he'd probably be like Bjergsen, Tyler 1, Aframu, Tyler 1. He'd name himself probably 3 times. But that's besides the point.
Why Aframu? Just because he's like an OG player?
Yeah, he's just a player that's been there forever. Like you think of like the people that he would have known that used to play way back in the day when he
But I
actually
don't.
might have known who was in
But
the
I don't
LCS.
even think
That's
he
why he
would have
said
known
double
that
it,
back in
no?
the day. Because Doublelift's
No,
like,
Afro was a huge player. He'd probably say Meteos as well.
I don't even think he would have followed LCS though. That's the thing. Okay, he would know Meteos because he like Meteos like was hardcore flaming him back in the day.
Yeah.
Or
Although
he'd probably start flaming Freak or something as well. Because like,
sneaky.
yeah. Oh, he would. Yeah, he would know Sneaky, but once again, that's like former.
Yeah. So
Come to
that's
think
why
of
I
it,
say Afro move.
he probably named
Because it's
players he had like interactions with.
yeah, that's why I say Afro, because it's one of the OGs and he's still in the league. So it's like him and Bjergsen are the two that come to my mind. I guess Impact as well. Okay. All right. That is it for this episode, JNT. We've gone almost
We
2
kind of
hours.
rambled a little bit like towards the end with the Champions League
It's a
stuff and
podcast. We're kind of supposed to. It's a fucking podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. We love you, as we as I like to say every once in a while. And something I say every episode, hit the subscribe button, please. We really much appreciate when you do that. And for those that are new to the episode, if you want to catch us live, we're always live Monday nights, late Monday nights. We start at just past 12 midnight on the East Coast and just past 9, around 9:15, 9:30ish on the West Coast, PM, of course. So if you want to join the live discussion, you can see us every Monday. We go live around the same time. Yeah, I don't got any other shoutouts. JT, any shoutouts?
shout out new Hearthstone expansion drops tomorrow. Let's go.
Oh, Pog Hearthstone. What a fun game. Isn't
I
it
know.
weird that like I've become such a hater of Hearthstone? I
But
was a
you'll
huge
watch me
Hearthstone
play it
guy,
all the
man.
time.
Yeah, I will. I will. I will. I was a huge Hearthstone guy, and that game's man. Anyways, oh yeah, one last reminder. Please give us some of them donations or subs so that we can fund our prop sheet. I will remind you of this. All right, that's enough. This has been episode 81 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We will see you guys next